Call the Brevard County Charter Review Commission to order. If we would all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, led today by Dave Newman.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If we could please call the roll, that'd be great.
Here.
Kendall Moore. Here. Marcia Newell. Here. Mike Paradopoulos.
Here.
Marie Wilkerson. Here. Lace Tredis.
Here.
Bob White. Matt Nye. Gabriel Jacobs Kirstein.
Here.
Tom Jenkins.
Here.
Cole Oliver. Sue Schmidt.
Here.
Jordan Chandler.
Here.
Vic Lupker. Here. And Dave Newman.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Before we get started on the meeting, I want to make sure anybody in the audience and on our team, of course, as well, if you could please turn off your cell phones at least to silent mode. That would be much appreciated, so we can move swiftly through the agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Schmidt.
before you start into the agenda, I'm sure some people here that are maybe not aware, but Mr. Paradopoulos' dad passed away this week, and I have known his father for a lot of years, and he was probably one of the nicest and kindest people that I've ever met. And I've met a lot of people in my life. And I just really wanted to say, and I even got to know him before I knew Mike. Now, I could say that Mike interned in my office, but I won't say that when I was a commissioner because it is the truth. And I just wanted to say on behalf of everybody up here that we really want to send our condolences to you, to your family, and I, as one, really appreciated your dad. And he would like football, too, which I like.
Well, that's very generous of you, Sue. Thank you very much. And it's been a remarkable outpouring for my father. And he is a part of that greatest generation. And it's great when you grow up knowing that you're loved every day of your life. And my dad gave my brother and I a lot of balance and that confidence that, it's great to be loved by your parents. And we've lost him. He's in a better place now. And we're just really blessed to have friends like yourself and others. And we're really grateful for that. So thank you very much. It's very generous of you. Thank you. All right, as we move forward, we have the roll call has been completed. We have now the approval of minutes. Does anyone have any concerns about the minutes from last time? Okay, without objection, Mr. Fisher moves that forward. I second it, and it is approved.
Chairman,
Of course.
I just want to say she does a bang-up job on those minutes. She really is good.
Really?
Done a bang-up job before the meeting.
Yeah, you guys have been great. Yeah. Well said. With that, we'll move to reports. Let's go to our staff to see if there's some reports. Jim?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. At your desk should be the memo for the land sales that was asked at the last meeting. You can see there's been somewhere in the neighborhood about 10 parcels over the last 5 years that were sold. And what we've shown is where the parcels have to go back. I believe it was Mr. Jenkins mentioned at the last meeting. For example, if you purchase land for road widening, you also often end up with a lot of little spare parcels here and there. If you buy it with local option gas tax, then those funds have to go back to local option gas tax. So there are some restrictions, but you do see there was about $14,000 that went to the affordable housing just for the parcels. But the total revenue is not a large amount over the past 5 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and then I've spoken to the supervisor of elections staff last week. They're working on getting you the timeline. They're facing the same issue the rest of us are facing regarding supply chain issues. They've actually discussed about how they had to change their supplier for the sample ballot for the paper. So they're being pretty careful and cautious on giving you the correct timeline. So as soon as I have that from you all, we will get it to you. And then last but not least, the 3 panel attorneys, we're still finishing up the letter of engagements, but they have, I sent them the package today so they understand the ballot language that you're all discussing. So that way they'll be ready to go if you vote on any ballot language today.
Great. Any questions for staff? Thank you. Next, we'll go to Mr. Gugelman.
Very keen question for those of you that are really deeply into county charters about issues with constitutional officers and county officers and correct terminology. The memo's in the package. His concern is that in the charter we've been using the term county officers. That language is actually used in the state constitution, so it's not incorrect language. But it was that's obviously a question on the advanced level.
Absolutely. Are there questions for Mr. Gugelman? Okay, let's move forward. Anything else for the good of the order before we move into our proposals? Okay, let's go into proposal number 8, vacancies and suspensions. We've been tabling that issue for a few meetings now, trying to work through it. Thank you. I believe Mr. Burns, oh great, Mr. Burns is here. Welcome back, and why don't you lead us in the discussion and see where it takes us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, my condolences on the loss of your father. I lost my father at a young age too, so I can empathize with you. So.
Thank you kindly.
So again, I think, we've talked about this proposal before. I think the last county commission meeting we had kind of speaks to the urgency and the necessity of this proposal, as we had a very controversial item on the agenda that was involved in District 2. And again, there was no representation for the citizens in District 2 at the county commission level to make that decision. I don't think that it would probably have changed the outcome. But again, those peoples didn't have a commissioner to represent them on that issue. I'm talking about the Driftwood grant. Other than that, according to the staff, the supervisor hasn't gotten back to us with a timeline. So I would just ask that whatever timeline that she says is necessary would be what the language would state in the proposal, whether that's 6 months, a year, whatever it may be, because I think we are dependent upon, her needs and abilities.
All right, are there questions? We tabled this for a reason, for everyone to do their homework and see what kind of ideas we come up with. Vic, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Burns, quick question for you. Yes. Thanks for coming and bringing us forward, too, by the way. The appointment process itself, is that something you're set on, and it has to be the county commissioners that do that versus at state level? 'Cause here's my thought on this, and maybe you guys can expand as colleagues up here, that it could get into kind of a competitive thing if you have a split commission in the future. Like our commission is going to completely turn over in 2 years. And now you've got kind of a public fight to get a voting block in place versus just letting the state handle it. Are you opposed to changing the language if that was something that we decided we want to do here?
I'm not set in stone on it, but let me give you my rationale on that thought process. And this kind of goes to what Mr. Rogerson brought up last time. Having it done at this level as opposed to the state. So say the governor was to make that appointment, and right now, if I remember correctly, I think Governor DeSantis won by less than 0.5% or something like that, but not in Brevard County. I think Andrew Gillum only had 30% of the vote here.
Could you speak into
I'm sorry. I think Andrew Gillum only had 30% of the vote. So if Andrew Gillum had become the governor and he was making that process, it would not be an accurate representation or fair representation of the constituents in Brevard County, because he wasn't majority elected in this county. But at the county commission level, we won't have that issue because each district was elected by, their own 100,000, whatever the number may be, individuals. So that's why I think it's better to have it down here at the county level, and it's also done in the sunshine. At the state level, there's no sunshine. So there's no discussion about it. There's no visibility on the process. There's just an announcement made. I think at the county level, we can at least have people say, hey, I want to come, I want to try for it. And then the process is laid out right in front of everyone. There's an opportunity for public comment to speak about things that people may or may not know about individuals that are applying for the position, and they have a chance to compete. It should be it's an elected office, so people should at least be able to hear, a campaign, so to speak.
Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for that, and when I'll open it for discussion, fine. If not, that gives me the clarity I was looking for.
Sure, Mr. Moore.
Mr. Chairman, on that same point that Mr. Luker brought up, I had a same or similar concern, but I think Mr. Burns referenced it kind of early on, that the overall intent of his proposal was to make sure we didn't end up with an empty seat for an extended period of time. And I think you saw it in Palm Bay, you saw it here, but primarily at the county commission scenario, you have no mechanism to compel the governor to do it. And so even if you leave it in his hands, you have absolutely no mechanism to make sure that it gets done. It's the governor's choice. He can or can't, you know what I mean? He or she can or can't at their own will. And so I like the idea of it coming back to the county commission in the event that it does get done. I don't know that there's a way to prevent I don't know what you called it, political tribalism, for lack of a better phrase, right? But having it in the hands of the county commission and making sure that the empty chair lasts for the least amount of time possible is what was important to me, and that's why I thought that Mr. Burns' proposal had some merit.
Mr. Barrett?
I agree with that. I think it's really important, looking at your proposal, as far as the timeline. If it was 120 days, it would be 4 months. And then 30 days before that, and that would be for a special election at that point, up to that 4 months, because then it would go to the commissioners. But my concern is because you also have 30 days just to qualify, and let's say it's 5 months, and then if you have 30 days for qualifying, you're down to 4 months before a primary at that point. And I just think, I mean, elections are really expensive, but I think there's perhaps a better way. Maybe it's county commission appointing. I mean, I understand your concern with the governor. I think a lot of people have that concern, that that did not occur. And the people in that particular district really, at this point, don't have a commissioner. So I do think something needs to be done, but I think the special election you're looking at is going to cost a lot of money in a very short time. And then that person may also, if they want to run for commissioner at that point, they'd be going through a special election perhaps at the same time they're going through a primary. Right. So you're talking about, for the taxpayers, a double whammy, really.
And I think, listening to your feedback, I tend to agree with you. And I think that having the appointment and the process that I tried to outline, and I don't think it's perfect, but that's just my thought process on how to do this, is almost an election in of itself, because it's, at least it's not just, you know, them anointing and appointing someone. There's some process to it. People submit their qualifications. There's a little bit of debate about those who are applying for the position. So I think it's if we have to get rid of the special election, which I'm okay with, I think that the appointment process that I outlined is a good caveat for, or supplement for that.
Others? Please, you're recognized.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that I see a potential real problem with the appointment process, and that is that if there's a vacancy, that means there's 4 county commissioners who will be voting, and your proposal says if more than one person receives the highest ranking, there shall be a vote of the county commissioners, and the winner is by majority. Well, 2-2, there's no majority. So I don't know what happens then under your proposal.
That's why I tried to make the scoring is 1 to 10. I think for the normal boards, it's 1 to 5. And I left the scoring completely subjective. You know, so 1 to 10, those numbers can mean something completely different to each commissioner. And the purpose of that was to try to decrease the chance of there being a tie. I don't know specifically how to address the majority portion with the 2-2 if that were to occur. I think it's unlikely to occur, but it could occur, and I don't know. I haven't thought about how to rectify that. I don't know if there's a Robert's Rules issue for it or anything.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, push-up contest, something, I don't know. Whoever has the cheapest chair, whatever.
Let me interject here if I can. We have a proposal number 17, and we're going to talk about that today. Mr. Tom Blues, you've taken a lot of time on these kind of issues about term limits and kind of how we do that. I think a lot of us would love to get your opinion, if you wouldn't mind, because we're trying to kind of find a middle ground here where a person doesn't get appointed or selected and then serve. I mean, it seems like it almost bleeds into your issue. If you want to take a stab at it, if not, I respect that too. Oh, sure. Okay. Okay, perfect. No problem.
How about this as a thought? If we're in that situation, hypothetically, hopefully we won't be, but if we are, and it's a 2-2 split commission, and they can't get there, you got 2 votes, kind of lays the same what I'm saying, the same concern, then we would punt to the state.
I don't see an issue with it. I don't know if there's another alternative to it as far as, I think only elected officials can vote on it, so I wouldn't say like the county attorney or county manager or something should weigh in. So I don't know what the other alternative would be, unless it's like we treat them like a hung jury and make them keep going, until they come to.
What do you guys think about that?
Mr. Chairman, if you were to use a point system, as he describes, the likelihood of having a tie is considerably less because you're assigning points based on what he's proposing. You're ranking them by points. So that, you're not just voting, I nominate this guy, I second.
I think we're all friends. Our chair likes to say, skin a cat. Ways of doing it.
Yeah, I think we're still pretty far afield on this. I mean, I know in watching some of these bid contests going on, that when you rank something 1 to 10 and you want to nuke somebody, you give them a 1, and suddenly a person who might be the second or third choice wins because they got 5s and 6s. So.
Very valid, very valid.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to point out that, yeah, I think that's true, because if a county commissioner wanted, 2 county commissioners wanted 1 person, they'd give them 10s. If they don't want, they get around 0. The other 2 county commissioners want someone else, they give them 10s. That's a tie.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually a lot more likely than people are saying right now because of that scenario.
I mean, the only my 2 cents on it, and it bleeds into us. We was asked about the term limits issue, is if there's less than 2 years left, and we really don't have an election to go from, maybe you throw in the idea of the governor has 90 days to act. If the governor chooses not to act after 90 days, that the county commission has the authority to select a person. I'd also even want to throw in, because I like term limits a lot, saying that person who's selected can't run for office that next election. Then you have a kind of a pure person in there, as opposed to having the advantages of incumbency, et cetera. But that's throwing a lot of variables at something. And just like I've kind of tabled this issue, I think 2 meetings now, it's a pretty unique idea, and I just want to make sure we understand the variables that are there. And I actually think the governor made the right decision by not appointing someone yet, because we were so close to election time, and that whoever was appointed would clearly have the upper hand in an election this fall. So again, I'm open to all ideas. I just want to throw that out there. I just think that I'd like to give the governor the first shot at it, whether he Republican or Democrat. That's something that's in the law today. And if they choose not to act and there's still substantial time left in the term, I don't think it's out of, I think it's well within the bounds of the county commission, so they have an unequal number of votes, so you don't have this constant tie. Or we also recognize the need, as Robin and Sue and others can tell you on the board, that you need supermajority votes oftentimes. And in this case, with only 4, you actually need a unanimous vote in a lot of these cases. So, Robin, if you want to add.
Yeah, I actually got appointed I think in the mid 90s by this process, and it was done by the Titusville City Council. City councilman resigned, Eileen Davis. You could, I think, say it needs to be a unanimous decision by the commission. If you got a unanimous decision to appoint somebody, they do. If it don't, punt it to the governor. And if, I think in that case, commissioners will try to figure out how to get somebody, and I don't think they want to punt to the governor.
Right. I think at that time we've done everything that we can, to try to fill the seat in the most representational way as possible. If the county commission can't come together and, vote on it, to fruition, then I guess the only recourse we have left at that point would be to send it to the state.
So I wouldn't make a majority of the county commission, I'd make a unanimous decision by the county commission.
And then if they don't, then it would go to ballot, Mr. Fisher, is your thought process?
Yes.
Okay.
Or supermajority, I mean 3-1.
Well, that's I'm not clear on right now of what this, I think there was some,
What that would entail.
right, if it's 3-1 or is it 4-0? I think that's still being debated.
No, I like the unanimous thought, to be honest.
So, as the proposal we're looking at now, I just want to make sure I'm listening to the same thing everyone else is that the governor will have first shot, or the county commission would have first shot to fill the vacancy?
County commission.
All right, I think we should bring that to a vote for one thing.
I'd rather the
Okay,
county
so it's either
commission.
county commission or the governor, first shot. And the second one, of course, would be, at least my opinion, would be the governor gets first shot. And after X number of days, the county commission would get a shot if the governor chooses not to appoint. That's another part. And then the third part would be, when does it kick in where this will even happen? Meaning, is it 2 years or less? Is that what we're all kind of agreeing on? Because if there's a vacancy with more than 2 years, you have a special election during a regular general, correct? Right? So I guess the mark would be that 2 years or less mark. So I think the first thing we'd want to have a debate on, of course, is governor gets first draft pick, or the county commission gets first draft pick. And if the county commission, according to Robin's idea, which I think is a good one, either a full unanimous support or a supermajority vote would pick. And if they don't pick, then the governor gets the shot. Is that what we're talking about here? Ms. Roderson?
Yeah, I'd just like to state for the record, I think you have good intentions here in trying to resolve, in my opinion solely, what is a minor problem. For me, we can discuss the particulars, put them all in order. I'm going to be a no on all of it because I think it's not a big enough problem to take this complicated thing and put it on the ballot in front of the voters. Then to me, it's not worth the problem. To me, it's not significant enough for it. So we can discuss it. I'm a no.
I'm just trying to keep the conversation going. So, anybody else? Because remember, today there's only 12 of us. If 3 say nay, it's history. And you're a nay?
No,
Okay.
I was going to, I might be a nay, but I was.
I might be a nay as well. I'm just trying to keep the conversation going. Ms. Stratus, go ahead.
But I just want to point out that the current charter is that there is a special election if it's more than 1 year in office, not 2.
Okay.
And just to Ms. Roderson's point, I definitely appreciate her opinion. At the county commission level, or meeting we had on Tuesday, there was a constituent that came up and voiced those same concerns that, he's a Merritt Island resident and they're making decisions and he doesn't have any representation.
Sure.
So it's how people feel about it, and I don't 100% agree with her, but it can be something small, especially if it's not your district. But to other people, it's extremely important. So.
Well, again, wherever the conversation wants to go, we can change it from 1 to 2, Ms. Stratus. It's again, whatever y'all want to get to. I don't want to stifle the debate at all. Ms. Newman?
Can we just pause and find out how we feel on each of those issues you mentioned?
Sure, happy to. Let's finish the debate on that, and then we'll have the vote, and then we'll go. I think it's a good question, Tom. Go ahead.
Yep, I'm trying to see if it's on. I don't think it's working.
You got a big voice.
Yeah, I'll just speak.
There you go.
Everybody can hear. It's
Yeah,
all I
you're
care.
on.
Perfect, thank you. I do think it's definitely a worthwhile thing to talk about, and especially on switching it from 1 to 2, because at some point we do have to create some mechanics in here. It's just kind of left way broad and wide open, and especially Chair Herodopoulos' thought, we definitely need to at least give the governor that first bite at the apple, because we should all be, I really do believe that we should be deferring to Florida statute. And then from there, if they're not going to do it, we got 2 years now instead of 1 and go forward. Because at this point, as a representational way, there really isn't anybody getting represented, especially if it's 2 years out. If something were to happen, I think it'd be absolute chaos, and anything can happen in these cases. We've seen it already happen. So I really would hope that we go through those processes to actually vote for each individual thing and basically try to create something to solve this problem, because I do think it's a legitimate problem.
Okay. Others?
Mr. Chairman, I thought you might go one by one. I think Tom's polling idea was a good one to kind of figure that out. But to Ms. Rogerson's point, I think we've seen 2 or 3 issues. So the one was the not having a voice. He referenced that. The second one, in which you saw in Palm Bay, could be the case in the county commission. You have a challenge to even legally define what constitutes a supermajority, which I'm not sure that question is still even clear as of today. And that's been going on for several months and may be decided by litigation. But last but not least, for those of us in the room that are involved in some of these quasi-judicial processes, if you end up in a 2-2 tie on a development project, that means you're going to sit on the sidelines for a year before you have the ability to bring it back. So there are significant potential consequences out there for only having 4 members, you know what I mean, rather than 5. So I do think it's an important one. I would rather see it be local rather than the governor first. Self-governance, I'll take, you know what I mean, before it makes its way to Tallahassee. If the self-governing entity fails to take the action, I do think it would be open for the governor, but I'd rather see it in the county commission first rather than that. For somebody who appears before elected bodies, supermajorities are hard enough. To get every single one, I think it's going to be going to the governor most of the time if we set the standard, you know what I mean, that high. Not opposed to it, but I think the reality of it is getting all 4 on the same page on an issue of filling a vacancy is going to be a very difficult scenario. And so even though we're trying to keep it, or I'd prefer keep it local, I think requiring a unanimous vote is going to send it to Tallahassee quite often, because getting 4 on the same page, I think, would be a great challenge in this scenario.
Mr. Chair, I have a really quick question. Just to clarify, I think there is absolutely significant consequences. My thing with the size of the problem is how often this occurs. So is anyone on staff able to tell us how often we've had vacancies on the county commission like this?
I can go to 91. It's been 0. And Mr. Jenkins and Ms. Schmidt might know more.
There was one time, I think, truthfully.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, when I meant 0, other than this
That's my entire
occasion,
purpose.
yeah.
It's not that, yes, absolutely, there's huge complications when you can't have them all, but that's my point.
And I think, you know, we've been blessed, you know, to not have this occur except for a resignation, but we have 2 candidates right now that are in they're very seasoned, you know, and life can happen very quickly, especially if they're running for 2 different seats, and we could potentially have two vacancies on the county commission due to health reasons or what may have you.
Okay. And I just want to, because I forgot to mention that part, and so I appreciate Mr. Moore's comments, and I want to endorse them, particularly on the part where we lost my train of thought. It was on the part of the supermajority. I do, like, unfortunately, like I like to call balls and strikes in politics. Nothing, I'm in partisan groups, but I like to keep it level. Unfortunately, we're entering a time where things are much more partisan and there's less people working together. And so if you're trying to get a supermajority and there's one person that could derail an entire 2 years worth of county commission business, that is an opportunity that could happen, and I do not want that to happen. So I would hope that we would not go for a supermajority, and whatever a simple majority would look like of 3, I would want us to endorse and do that.
But to clarify your opinion, the governor gets first shot.
Of course,
here.
yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Pick, and then I'll go to Mr. Kirsten.
This is what I like about Mr. Fisher's proposal. It basically makes all 4 commissioners put the good of the people first. If they can't get together, the 4 of them, and find a qualified candidate that they can agree on, then we know there's politics in play, and we punt it to the governor.
In that vein, just to make things a little more complicated too, if we go to the governor first, and it comes back to the commissioners, and there's this concept or I guess concern that they're not going to be able to come up with something, it's unanimous. What happens after that if it is unanimous, that's the rule, and they can't come to a conclusion? Does it go back to the governor? How would that aspect work as well? Maybe I missed something. So I think...
So you're saying that if under the theory that Mr. Newman might want, I think I would like as well, is the governor gets first shot.
Right.
The governor doesn't make a selection. The county commissioners can't make a selection. Where does it go next, what you're saying?
Because it's unanimous, yes.
Okay.
because the rule is, and then they can't come to a conclusion, it's 2-2 or 3-1, whatever the case may be, what happens then, I guess?
I think at that point, then you have no choice but the special election. At that
We all become commissioner. No, I'm just kidding.
I think you have to have the people have to decide at that point with a special election.
Well, right now, if we do nothing, if it's more than a year, to Mr. Tredis's point, it's a special election. So we can do nothing.
Right.
And that's looking really strong right now. So
We're back to.
Well, that's my main point is that we don't have, the governor, the state gave the county this authority, and we gave it back. So the will of the state is that we make this decision. But for some reason, we gave that back to the state. And I just don't think I think they're trying to let us govern at the lowest level. I think the people here would appreciate that. And I think it also creates the sunshine issue. There's no sunshine whatsoever in that appointment process as it is right now. And I think at least the people will feel more comfortable knowing, how this person that's representing them came to be.
Okay.
I think it's a lot less political. I think the governor's appointment is very political. And we're kind of watching how the candidates came up through this, that's being considered now. And what are we, 90 days, 120 days since Commissioner Lober left? And it doesn't look like the governor's probably going to make an appointment. And I know there's other appointments around the state that's waiting on the governor after the commissions, and it hasn't happened yet. And I think local commissioners will have a better pulse of Brevard and who can fill that seat than the governor would also.
Anybody else? Mr. Jenkins?
I would go local first, governor second. I would go with simple majority.
And no point system.
No.
Okay.
You ruined that.
I'm sorry. Just making sure we're all aware of those points. Okay. All right. So let's and it might be for moot as well. We'll see. But let's just at least go through the process and see where we go. So the first question we'll call the roll on it is: do we would like the governor to have the first shot, or the county commission to have the first shot at a vacancy for the county commission? Is that everyone agrees on? Okay. So let's just go with we'll give the local option first. So if you're in support of the local option, say yay. If you're in essence support of the governor's option, say nay, and we'll see where the votes go from there. Okay. So Melissa, if you could please call the roll on yays and nays. Again, if you're for the locals first, we're not saying what majority or unanimous, just governor or local government. Say yay. If you're for the governor having the first say nay. Is everyone clear on that? Okay. If you please call the roll.
Robin Fisher,
For local, so I guess I say
Yeah.
Kendall Moore,
Yes.
Marcia Newell,
Yay.
Mike Paradopoulos,
No.
Marie Rogerson,
I'm going to abstain because I don't like either.
I'm sorry, you can't abstain.
I can't?
No, not under Florida law, unless you have a conflict of interest.
I don't. So then I'm a nay.
Blaise Tredis,
No.
Gabriel Jacobs Kirstein,
Yay.
Tom Jenkins,
Yes.
Sue Schmidt, Jordan Chandler,
Yay.
Vic Lubker, and Dave Newman.
Nay.
All right. So we're going to go to the locals first, according to that plan. And now the next step on that would be, what would it take for the locals to move forward? Would it take a simple majority of the commissioners present? That means 3 in this case, or a unanimous decision. So anybody have any strong thoughts on unanimous versus simple majority? Not all at once. Okay.
And I believe, I may be mistaken, but every municipality that does appointments does it in this manner, and I think that they're all by simple majority,
Okay, so it'd take 3 out of 4 commissioners in agreement.
Seems more consistent.
Okay. And if it's a tie, we're all saying it'd go
To the governor.
to the governor? That everyone?
Right.
Okay. Oh, you know me, yeah. So, all right, so I know you brought up the idea of unanimous vote. What's your pleasure?
I'm okay with simple.
Okay. Anyone object to a simple majority on that? So we take 3 out of 4 votes in order to appoint for these remaining years. Anyone object to that? Okay, so right now we're at the local government, a simple majority. And the other question would be, can this person run for office once being appointed by their fellow commissioners when that term expires? Because we have this term limits issue, which I know a lot of people are very passionate about. And given the debate we had last time, it sounded like we didn't want to give anybody more than 8 years or face the consequence.
I think so. I've been following what's happening in Cocoa Beach. You know, they just made an appointment to their vacancy for Mr. Martinez there. And one of the things that was brought up was that very same issue. Can we make this person promise they won't run? And they can promise that all they want to, but it's not enforceable because they can run. You know, according to state law, there's nothing. They're going to meet the qualifications. So their attorney said, well, just make them go on the record saying they promise they won't run, and if they do, then the voters will know that. So I don't know if we can prevent somebody from running. We can say that you shouldn't, but I don't know if we can.
I agree with that.
I agree. You can't stop somebody.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, and I'm not necessarily in favor of this. I'm kind of hurting myself, but Mr. Gugelman, you certainly can't take that promise to the bank, but could you by charter make a person appointed through this process ineligible?
Yes.
And can we do it with this measure? Can it be wrapped up in this?
Yes.
I think that's a big mistake.
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of it, but we're counting, and if we can't get, if there's more than 3 people here that don't believe in this, it's going to go south here pretty quickly. I think that's what Mr. Herodopoulos' point was just a few minutes ago. So trying to find common ground that will ultimately work.
Yeah, I'm trying to be consistent also with the term limits thing that we debated at length last time. But again, I'm game either way. This is the whole point, is having an honest discussion about where you think. And there's a lot of experience here, and I want to make sure we make use of that, because you all see this on the local level and for many years before me.
The one point that Mr. Fisher made previously was about the learning curve. And if somebody's here for 3 or 4 months, they're just beginning to learn the ins and outs. And I just don't know how productive they'll be if they're denied the opportunity to run.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I'd like to speak as a previous commissioner, and so was Robin. And I was on a city council before that for 2 terms, and Robin was on a city council before that. And you learn a lot by being on a city council first and understanding budgets and solid waste and all kinds of things, water, sewer, whatever. But to me, it does take, when you get elected as a commissioner, I don't care if you've been on a council or not, it takes time for you to learn what it's about. And I think to say you can't run, and yet that person may be only on there for 3 months, I think that's correct. In fact, it really is costing the taxpayers a lot of money at that point, because to me, if it's like so many months, leave it vacant. And if you have 2-2 and things don't pass, that's the way it is.
My other concern is that it's going to stifle good candidates from coming in. Those that are duly qualified are not going to want to come on and be appointed and then not be able to run as well. So there's that concern, and I think if they're doing a good job, they're elected. If they don't, then they're definitely not going to serve a second term. And maybe we keep it under a year instead of the 2-year mark, and that kind of balances that out a bit too.
I have a simple question. If the argument is that you need to be in the office for a while to understand how to do the office, yet we're trying to get someone in the office to do the job in a brief period of time,
Right.
Are we not basically saying that they wouldn't be qualified to do the job we're trying to get them to do right now? Like, it doesn't make much sense to me.
Something's better than nothing, I guess, is the side of it. But yeah, it's a good point.
And again, I'll just rehash I'll give you both sides, because I lived it on many. We talked about the Marco Rubio example last time. He won a special election. He got more than his term limits, right? I think the other one is that, getting to your point, Gabriel, on the sense of, everyone's anticipating an election. Let's say the person is towards the end of their 8 years, and there's an election gearing up, so to speak, and Tom and Mary and Sue and Bill are all running, and the person leaves office for whatever reason, and a person gets appointed. That is a huge advantage.
Right. Being an
For
incumbent.
running for office. When you're the incumbent, suddenly people are your best friends, and contributions and so forth come in. So just recognize, going back to the term limits debate that we made last time, which is understand what we're walking into. If you provide this opportunity, you're letting the establishment pick their person, and it might supersede a person who's been running or wanting to run, recognizing, I think we all recognize, like 95% of incumbents win.
Right.
And that's for obvious reasons that we talked about with term limits. So just putting it out there, and you can see the pros and cons of both sides. That's why this is an interesting issue, and we have to decide, to Ms. Roderson's point, do we even take it up? Because we know that with 1 year or less, we can move forward. So wherever you all want to go. So I take it that you guys are okay with this person running for office then? That's okay? All right?
I'm not, I'd rather that they not.
Well, now that you make that point, too.
Yeah, I'm with Blaze as well. I would rather they not.
So I think, so the way that Palm Bay, I was mistaken when I came up here to speak on the term limits thing. It wasn't state statute. This was in Palm Bay City's charter. They state that if you are appointed, your partial term counts as a full term, whether you're there for 2 days or whether you're there for 3 or 4 years. So if you are appointed, you just got rid of one of your terms. You're filling a full term no matter how long you're there. So in the case of the county commission, if someone's appointed for less than a
And
year.
that goes back to our record from last time, too. Yeah. So, all right, so what's on the table right now is local choice first, and the ability to serve out that term with a simple majority of the county commissioners saying yay. If it's 1 year, is it 2 years left, or 2 years, or 1 year? You want 2 years on this, or do you want, because right now it's 1 year, right, Ms. Travis? Yeah.
1 year right now.
So it would be, if there's 2 years or less, they would have this ability. Is that what you all want to vote on today, or do you want to think about it for next time? It's whatever you all want to do.
I'd consider waiting until next time so we could get 2 more folks in here just to get their opinions
Yeah,
as well.
I think there's a vote on this. I think it's
Yeah.
going to go down, just so you know.
Yep. Mhm.
Okay.
I'd also like to think to have Paul kind of look at this a little deeper from the perspective of what state statute calls for. If we're already locked in by the state, we got to do what the state says. Am I wrong?
That's true, if you're locked in by the state. I don't think you are, but I can look at that
Can you
further.
look at that for us?
I will.
And what do you mean by locked in?
What's state statute say? Because I don't have that, I haven't read that yet. So I think, yes, I need more time. I'll say that for sure. Do you know, Paul?
You got some time there? When's our next meeting? August 4th? Okay.
It's supposed to be our last meeting, too.
Okay.
Supposed to be.
Something I failed to do, you asked me last time, what do other counties do? Because we're not reinventing the wheel here. I mean, obviously this happens, so I need to go back and look at some other charters as well. I failed to do that.
Probably
Can
wouldn't
I-
hurt. Have
can
we
I-
looked at have the staff looked at other charters on this?
No.
Okay.
I just want to make
Sure.
a quick clarification so that I'm not misunderstanding something. Our current charter says that if there's more than a year left, we hold a special election, correct?
Correct.
If there's less than a year, then that's what we're talking about here, the whole rigmarole.
Right.
But it sounds like the whole charter commission doesn't like the idea of somebody getting appointed in an election season when there's probably already people running and all that. So we're talking about really a 6-month period of time. This is the issue that we're discussing. To me, again, I go back to this, for 6 months, why are we gonna hash this out and give it to the voters? Like, it's not broken, don't fix it. This has only happened once. That's just my stance.
Mr. Herodopoulos, did we lose you originally when it became local control, or is it your greatest concern about the ability to have the opportunity to run after being appointed?
Well, you had me at all those points. You lost me at all those points. I mean, my take on it is kind of where Ms. Roderson is where if there's less than a year left and I would like the idea where you have a caretaker, meaning someone comes in, just like you have staff right now, right? That his office staff's still there. I'd like to see someone be appointed as a caretaker and let the elections fall as they wish. I recognize, because I was in the legislature, it took me a while to figure out how the process worked. But I feel a lot more comfortable where the voters would have a true kind of say on who that next commissioner is going to be. And I think I do know that when you get appointed to something, you're going to have a huge advantage over those folks who wanted to run. In essence, the county commission could be picking the winner in a race that might be going on. I'm not going to name names, but if someone was selected, they're the incumbent. It's just free name ID from the newspapers. The lobbyists or interest groups are going to give that person money. And is it worth it for 6 months? And because I believe strongly in term limits, I don't want it to kind of give that upper hand. So I'm very comfortable with saying if the governor's unwilling to act, that the county commission moves forward, but I want to see them do it as a caretaker. And they're not going to pick some novice who's never been in politics. My guess is to be a former commissioner, city commissioner, could be someone deeply involved in politics who's always attended the meetings. So I would have no problem. It's kind of in that vein, and I don't want to make a person pledge and all these other things. I would like to think the person would come in, they're capable, they can kind of hit the ground running, and then the election would be held within 6 months. Right. And I think that's the most logical way of doing it. So that's my long-winded opinion to your good question. So
I just had a thought.
that's where I wanted to go with it, because I don't want to see that person get that upper hand, and if people would be kind of geared up to running. And to Mr. Tredis's point, if it's more than a year out, we know that it's a true election going on in a way. And unfortunately, if that happens, we also have that gap because it's qualifying and so forth. So you're going to lose those 3 or 4 months anyway because of a special election. So sorry for the long answer, but I kind of see it as that way. And this way we also don't kind of tread on the strong opinion that voters do have more than anything else in the county, which I recognize is term limits. I think they strongly believe in those, and I think that the poll numbers you spoke about are accurate. And I'd rather not go that route. But again, sorry for the long-winded opinion. That's where I'd like to go. But if you guys want to go otherwise, I'm either happy to vote today, or we can wait and vote next time.
I think you gave your answer just made me think of something that I think addresses some of the concerns. So whether the county commission appoints or whether the governor appoints, that person still has the advantage, no matter who it was. I think that maybe a way to solve this, plus you can't run next time, is that in order to qualify to be appointed, you have to be a county commissioner who has already termed out, or somebody who's already been a county commissioner. So at least for one term, so that if they are appointed, they can't run because now they're termed out for the reelection.
It's a good idea. Here's the problem.
Then we go to
See how we do this? We're kind of, every time we hit a point in a row.
And not even that, can you limit who's qualified to even fill that seat? Like, I think somebody could argue that they're allowed to be considered by the county commission.
Mr. Travis?
My thoughts are that these are good ideas and they're being discussed, but for me to vote, I need something in writing as it's going to appear in the charter. And next meeting is the last meeting. So I'd recommend that you come with a final version because just talking isn't going to work next meeting. I'm not going to vote for anything unless it's in writing and I know exactly what I'm voting for. So that's my suggestion to you.
Yeah, why don't I do, so I'll do my homework with the other charters in the county or in the state.
And I'm sure staff would help in that effort too. Mrs. Schmidt, you had a question? I'm sorry, Ms. Schmidt, did you have a question? I thought you were trying to get one. Anyway, Ms. Jenkins, yeah.
I was just going to say, you make a pretty persuasive argument, the caretaker.
And now that you brought that up, the caretaker knows what their role is going to be. They know that they're not going to be able to run, so it's fair to them. And then ultimately, that's not barring them from running in the next election after that. It's just that immediate election right after. Is that the way I understood it?
Yeah, I don't think it'd bar in the future. No.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're not putting any bars on it. We're just saying that, that they're going to serve out this term and they're ineligible some way, somehow, of running in the immediate to fill that spot. Can we do that, Mr. Goldman?
I think you probably can.
Okay.
One thing I'd comment is whatever you all come up with, we've talked about a lot of different variables here. I think if this thing becomes too complicated, it's going to go down in defeat by the voters because the voters are not going to understand it. So I would say follow the KISS rule. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yep. Okay. Others, Mr. Moore, did you want to add in that discussion? I mean, you guys, I know you work with the county commission a lot. I'd love to get your opinion on it.
Yeah, no, sir. I mean, if based on what Mr. Tredis said, I think a motion to table would be in order. I'd love to. I mean, I think we've gotten quite a bit down the road and appreciate your indulgence for a spirited discussion amongst that. We can all count. If we vote right now, I mean, it's going to go south. I think 3 people have been very clear about where they stand, and so an opportunity for Mr. Burns to see if he can come up with something that might be suitable for 10 members, I think would be in our best interest.
Okay, so we will table that, and we'll see how it works out next week. Again, this is the last meeting next time, so we need to your point, Mr. Tredis, we need to have something on paper. We can say yay or nay to, and hopefully all 15 will be here so that 3 people don't automatically decide it.
Yeah, I completely agree with Mr. Tress. I'll get a good product out here. I'll have it before the meeting and I'll send it out so everyone can take a look at it. And I just want to say I really appreciate the dialogue here. I think this is a bunch of smart people, and this has been a very effective conversation. I've learned a lot today myself. So
Thank you. All right, we're going to move to the next agenda item. That is number 17 on term limits. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And after that great spirited discussion, how could I not weigh in at least a little bit on that topic? I would just say there's an important clarification between what you proposed and what I'm proposing with term limits. I'm saying that if you've served 8 years as a county commissioner, you shouldn't be able to run for county commission again. What you're suggesting is that someone who's been appointed to a partial term of, I wasn't sure where they drew the line. I know it's less than a year, whether that person would be able to run again immediately, regardless of whether they've ever served on the county commission before. And so I definitely agree with that. I think the caretaker is a good idea. You're putting a check on those advantages of incumbency. You're not allowing the appointment to become an anointing, basically, by the county commission. So that's a good idea, but I just wanted to make sure that we knew the difference between
2 different ideas. We agree.
Two completely different ideas, both to check incumbency. That checks temporary incumbency. This checks incumbency on steroids. So let me tell you what happened since the last meeting. We went back to the drawing board. I met with my own attorneys about this, and we addressed some of the concerns that y'all had. I know Mr. Gugelman had raised the point at the last meeting that we were proposing an amendment to 2.4 to create term limits for the commission, but we were not reflecting that in 2.5. So the first change that we made is we incorporated by reference the changes in 2.4 to section 2.5. So you now have consistency between those 2 sections of the charter. The next thing we did was we created a limit on elections rather than service. That's something that Mr. Oliver, who's not here today, had brought up last time. That would help prevent gamesmanship, and it would also ensure that those who are appointed to a very short term or elected in a special election of fewer than 2 years would not then only be allowed to run for 1 additional term. They'd be allowed to run for 2 additional terms. I'm not sure how the commission feels about that. If you think that partial terms should not count against the term limits at all, I mean, there's an option for you to strike that. If you think that any partial term should count as a full term, you can make that adjustment as well. But the option is there for you. So we've addressed Mr. Luker's questions about partial terms. Basically, if it's a 2+ year partial term, that would count as a full term for the purposes of term limits. You'd only be allowed to run 1 more time. Yeah, if it's less than half of a term, you'd be able to run 2 additional times. So we've cleaned it up. We've made those adjustments, which I think reflect all the concerns, and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you have.
And I would just add, that is consistent with what you do in the Florida House, the Mark Ruby example I gave earlier. That is, I think, in line with what you're talking about.
Sure.
Questions?
Of course.
Recognize, please.
Okay, thank you. You know, I'll first of all comment, and that is that at the last meeting regarding gamemanship, I thought the gamemanship referenced was someone resigns to not serve their term and then try to defeat the term limits by doing that. But what was not discussed, I think that gamemanship problem is taken care of in the existing language in 2.5, where it says in parentheses, or but for resignation would have served. So I think that gamemanship problem is taken care of by that current language in the charter. And that's the comment. The concern I have with your proposal as it's written is that a county commissioner who is elected in a special election with, for example, 3 years left in office would only get to serve a maximum of 7 years under this wording, even though they've been elected twice. And I'm for term limits, but I'm also for someone being allowed to serve 8 years, not less. And this wording would prevent a person from serving even 8 years because they did a special election, they got 3 years, and then they only get another term. Right. And I have a problem with that. And I really go back to what was suggested as an alternative at the last meeting, which is simply put the word full in 2.4 and 2.5 to make it 2 consecutive full terms of office. The only difference to that is that if you could, and also under your proposal, you could serve 10 years and 1 month as a county commissioner if there's 2 years and 1 month left at this special election, because then you can run twice. So you'd get 10 years in office, but it limits it to, say, 7.
If there's 2 years and 1 month left, you would not be allowed to run 2 additional
Right.
times. It's fewer than 2 years.
Right.
So the maximum that you'd be able to get is 10 years. But I think, with the point you raised, the question is, what's the bigger injustice? Is it to allow someone to serve 7 years because they came in on a special election with 3 years left and then got 1 additional term? Or is it to not count the partial term against the limit, which would then allow them to serve 11 years? I mean, what is worse in terms of careerism and incumbency and allowing someone to monopolize that office?
Well, I think that, it's not up to the person to monopolize it. There was a special election. That was a very rare thing, as we already know, so it's not their doing.
Right.
And it's
Not initially.
Yeah, and also, I don't know, to me, just you win 2 elections. I mean, if you should get to serve 8 years, no matter what. So I err on the side of going up to 12 years, because under your proposal, you could do 10 years anyway, more than 10 years. Well, 10 years is the max, I guess. 10 years is the max under your proposal. So what's the difference between 10 and 12? I like going up to 12 instead of limiting someone to 7.
The difference, I don't know if you're referring to the original term limits proposal that had been before this commission, but that would have enabled every single person who runs for county commission to serve 12 years. Whereas, by contrast, this proposal would only allow people who win a special election at a very opportune time to serve 10 years. So this is a policy that would just be affecting very limited circumstances, whereas 99% of commissioners would get 8 years.
I understand that your proposal, no matter what, the first wording and this wording both prevent someone from running 2 terms, then sit out and do 2 more terms and do that ad infinitum. I understand that, so I support it for that reason. I'm just saying that I prefer an alternative that does not prevent, or that does not result in a county commissioner being elected twice and only serving 7 years in office. And that's what your proposal does. And again, I think just by adding the word full in 2.4 and 2.5 solves the problem, and it only adds up to 2 additional years to your proposal.
I have a question, if you could. Sure. How does it apply right now? Remind me with the 22nd Amendment. How does it apply with, where to spot right? I mean, if President Biden doesn't make it through this year and Kamala Harris becomes president, can she run for 2 full terms how does it work?
My understanding is that she would be able to run for 2 additional terms. I mean, this was the only incidents I've heard about this was the LBJ situation where he had come in office when JFK was assassinated. He had served the remainder of that term, gotten elected to another one, and then he was on the ballot to do a second full term, but he dropped out because he got demolished in the New Hampshire primaries or something like that.
right.
So I would definitely want Mr. Googleman to confirm that, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, I just thought that if it's because there's only about a year left in President Kennedy's term, as you know. I didn't know if there was kind of that, if they were in there to the question we're kind of dealing with right now, is that those extra 2 years, right? I don't know the answer, and then the second question I had is, would this apply to current commissioners? Meaning, John Tobias, I think, is going to finish out his second full term. If he wanted to run for the county commission in 2 or 4 years, could he run again?
My understanding of this, I mean, the objective of it is to create the lifetime term limit of 8 years. My understanding would be that upon the effective date of this amendment, which would be its passage, it would apply to anyone who's already served on the county commission and those who go on to serve 8 years in the future. So Tobias would not be eligible to run again.
Okay,
I'd like to speak to that issue too. When the county had it on the ballot to go to 2 terms, at that point, the legal clarifications were that anyone that was already serving could then run another 2 terms. And so some of those, one commissioner in particular, I'm not going to mention who, was in their first term, and then they ran for 2 more terms, so they served 12 years. Now, I happened to be there before that, and I served 12 years because there were no term limits at that point. But the last year I was there, it passed on the ballot, but it was determined that they had to be able to serve 2 more. They were grandfathered in at that point.
The language that the legal staff gave the county commission was that the legislation was progressive as opposed to retroactive.
Right.
It's from this point forward as opposed to going backwards.
That's why I think they'd be eligible. I mean, I know the intention. I just thought the impression I have is that this is, now it starts, and if one of the sitting commissioners who've served a full 8 years sat out for 4, they'd still have the chance at it. And I don't know if we can put a thing saying, sorry, guys and gals in the past, you'll never run for county commission again. I don't know if it matters, but I don't know if that helps or not. I would think that they would get another shot at record or not.
Yeah, I mean, as I made clear, that wasn't the intent. I mean, maybe
course.
legally we're constrained by that, but I would go back and I'd want to look at the original referendum that was passed here and see whether there was a specific grandfather clause in that, because I know sometimes when we adopt a term limits law in a different jurisdiction, if we want to grandfather in the current incumbents, we need to pass a grandfather clause. There's nothing stopping us legally from going after the ones who've already served. So
We need to look at 1994.
But there was no grandfather clause. It was a legal interpretation from the county attorney.
Right.
So it was a memo, but it wasn't actually litigated in front of a judge.
Exactly. Just an opinion.
It was an opinion.
I could be wrong, but I think it actually went to the Attorney General.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the way they applied it.
Are we talking about Truman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
well, I
think-
was talking about Nancy.
Oh, I think Truman Scarborough, Commissioner, actually got to serve another 8 years, and you couldn't it didn't apply to him because it didn't go into effect. And I think this would happen the same thing here.
Yeah, and I know and in the legislatures, in 1992, they passed term limits, but everyone started at 0 in 1992,
Sure.
and then they moved forward.
Sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think there's support for this. I just want to make sure that everyone knows what they're voting on and the variables that could take place. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, so the JFK reference, the 22nd Amendment, here's how that is written in the Constitution. JFK was assassinated before, he had longer than 2 years left on his term. It was November of '61.
No. He had less than a year left in his term. He was elected in 60. He was
Oh, yes,
assassinated
yeah.
in 63.
Right, and now, I'm staying corrected. The way it's written now, though, it says if it's more than 2 years, then you can only run one more time. If it's less, you can run twice. That's how the 22nd is written.
I'm reading it now. Let me just say.
This language then would mirror that language in the Constitution. That's what I had suggested about how to address the partial terms.
Looks like this thing can be tabled too.
Okay, it says, under the amendment, someone who fills an unexpired presidential term lasting more than 2 years is also prohibited from being elected president more than once. So to answer our question, if we'll just use today's occupants, if before the election of this year in November, should Kamala Harris become the president of the United States, she could run for an election in 2024, would be ineligible to run in 2028, according to the 22nd Amendment. Okay, just so everyone's clear. That's what it says right here. Yeah. So if there's more than 2 years left, they can't run for the second full term. So to Blaze's good question before about 7 or others, the current U.S. Constitution is the new president could not run twice for the presidency, just once. So they'd be limited. They wouldn't get the full 4 years plus whatever's left. That's just.
You could serve up to 10 years.
Yeah, up to 10 years, correct. I'm sorry, Mr. Trett.
I have a thought, an idea, a suggestion.
Okay.
And that is that I see this as two, good proposals, and I don't know where the vote would go. But what I don't like the idea is picking one, it losing, it's done. Because here's the way I look at it is the two alternatives are this proposal, which could limit someone who's elected twice to just 7 years in office. Another proposal is to add the word full to 2.4 and 2.5, and it would be that person could serve 2 terms plus more, and under this proposal they could as well. So I explained all that. But what I'm thinking of is the commission be given the more restrictive version to vote on first, which is this proposal. And if it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, then it goes to a vote on the other proposal, which would allow a person to serve up to 12 years instead of 10. I know it's a little bit confusing, but
That makes sense. Yeah, I get it.
because I just don't like the idea that you pick one and it loses and it's gone, when there's a more restrictive one and then there's a more a lengthier one, I guess you could call it.
Can I just make a point of clarification? So when you say the proposal that would allow people to serve up to 12 years, are you talking about not counting a partial term against the limit at all?
Right.
Okay.
All right, so let's go ahead and table this so that we can do a couple things. One is we have all 15 members.
Okay.
I think that's to your advantage. And we can think through how we do this. As it stands now, the proposal is that a person, should they fill the remaining term, if it's more than 2 years, they would be limited to less than 8 years. And if I guess the way, to your point, Mr. Trettis, if that proposal goes down, you can make an amendment. Actually, what I'd probably do is you probably want to have a vote on your proposal first, because that's really, you have to order it, because if it goes down, the thing's dead. So the way that the process would have to work is that we'd have to take up your amendment, which would be the more flexible one, first. If that passes, that takes the place of the more restrictive one. Okay? So that's for food for thought for next time. Everyone knows where kind of they stand on it. We just want to get the clarification on a couple other things.
Sure.
And we'll take it up for a vote next time, if that's
All right.
okay with you.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
thank
fine.
you.
Thanks.
I've got a question, just,
Okay, sure.
you guys got me thinking, and I'll make the pledge I won't run, so. But technically, I could run in 2024. And I've served 8 years already as a commissioner. Because you cannot, I'm grandfathered in to this new charter amendment. Is that correct?
Well, I think what it says is, in the charter currently, is you can't serve more than 2 consecutive terms. And let's see, you have served.
I've served 2 consecutive terms.
Okay.
and I'm termed out, and I believe that I could run again in 2024
For
if I
one,
was that
for
stupid.
one term,
For one term?
yeah,
Why one term?
because you can't serve two, you couldn't serve more than 2 consecutive terms.
I'm out.
I understand that. I understand that.
Skip terms, reset the clock, and do two, skip, reset the clock.
I think you, the way I read it, I think you could come back and run for one term.
I don't know. I think Commissioner Scarborough
That's-
showed that you can run, it doesn't count at all. You grandfathered in, and you can run for, I could run for 2 more consecutive terms.
This would be a question of whether a new law, which is adopted by the voters this November, prohibiting someone from running for the county commission after they've served 2 lifetime terms, whether that would apply to terms that occurred prior to the effective date of the amendment. And my understanding is that it would, but we seem to be getting some.
My understanding it wouldn't.
Here's the question then, I guess. Could you put something in this proposal that says that it's meant to be retroactive?
I don't think so.
I think the law
That-
doesn't let
yeah,
it be
just-
retroactive. It's only going to take effect the day the law goes into effect, so
Right.
everybody plays from that rules from day one.
Yeah, I would read it as, what.
Nick, go tell your
it's
buddies
a-
I
it's a
might
clean
run.
slate. It's a clean slate. If someone wants to come back, we can have
Shout it
Sue
from the
running, we can have
rooftops.
Robin running, it's gonna be an exciting time, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Fisher should be happy that Ralph and Dave are not here today, because that will be the charter review headline tomorrow. Fisher proposes way to run for second term.
Giles right now.
I'm not that crazy.
There's a press conference at 6 o'clock.
Right.
All right,
Okay.
so we'll table this.
Sounds good. Yeah, and we'll get more information about the retroactivity, and hopefully we'll have a final proposal. I'll contact Mr. Tredis as well and make sure we're on the same page with his wording.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you. And as I mentioned, the way that, wherever this works itself out with the language, we're going to have Mr. Tredis's vote first, because that's the way you have to handle it. Because you're taking up, you can't, if the thing goes down, it goes down. So you got to pick, you'll give your choice that way.
Yeah. Just a question of procedure here. I'd like to ask, because I don't know the answer to this, but the Charter Review Commission is in session for a year. And when does their term run out? Because what I see happening here is we're moving some proposals to our last meeting, and we may have to schedule yet another meeting on top of that.
For the ballot language, you're saying.
I don't think we can do that because we were already told that the county commission has to receive the
Yeah.
proposals that are being moved forward, and they have a date, and then also the supervisor of elections has a date to be able to get it on the ballot. And I don't think we can have another meeting after the 4th.
And that's kind of where I'm coming from is,
You have to have another meeting before the 4th, what you're getting at,
No.
right? You'd have to have a meeting before the 4th. And I think you have to have you have 10 days you have to give before a meeting, yes, public notice? Do we have that or not?
10 days, I know, is for an ordinance. You can call special meetings and fall under the special meeting rule.
Okay.
That would be an attorney call, but I think 24 hours is, under the board.
It is? Okay.
The Board
Yeah,
of
that
County
flexibility.
Commissioners, so,
you're going to need more than 24 hours.
yeah.
At least 3
exactly.
days.
Yeah. And, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
You, and I'm paraphrasing, you have to complete your business by August 12th. Under the charter, you have 1 year from your first meeting. You can stay in existence through the election to monitor the election. The date you have is, I just lost off my head, the supervisor needs it August 22nd. The board meeting, last board meeting for the 22nd is August 16th. And the agenda will get published that Wednesday or the Thursday before that meeting.
And you have the attorney review panel that's
Yeah,
got to
and
be
that's-
sandwiched in there.
Yeah, so we will be writing the attorney panel review pretty hard to get their opinions done. so
Plus
we
it
can
has
get-
to go to the 3 panel.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Attorney,
Yeah, it has to go to
yeah,
3 panel.
which really-
And we gave them a heads up on that, you all asked for 3 days, and we told them about the 3 days.
So we could, theoretically, we do back-to-back meetings on the 4th and then Thursday the 11th. Can meet that? If we had to?
That if you pass something on the 11th, that's
That would be for
Thursday.
ballot language, obviously.
Yeah, that would be on the Thursday. That's giving.
The agenda's already
Yeah, the
out.
agenda's out. I mean, we have something on the agenda, but there would be nothing behind the agenda, the ballot. You know, it would be what you pass, but not the ballot language to be approved. And so you're giving your 3-panel attorney 72 hours, and they would have to turn it in Sunday.
Well, that would keep the attorney fees down.
Could we just move the August 4th meeting up?
Do we want to have on the 28th?
Yeah, just move it.
Oh,
Oh.
You do have a requirement of public, well, you've had your that's an attorney question. You do have to have a public hearing
You've
10
had the
days
public,
apart.
you've had the minimum number for all
Yeah,
these that
so
are
I think you're okay.
on ballot.
You've had 3 public hearings.
Okay, so we've tabled that at number 17 for next time. We are moving to we're dealing with number 19 today, right in the ballot language. Right? That's our next item? Or do we want to go to Mr. Chandler's number 24? Okay, then we'll go back to the ballot language next, okay. So let's go to number 24 and talk about affordable housing a bit, see what we want to do with that. And then we'll go to the ballot language issues that we have to this point. So, Mr. Chandler, you're recognized on measure number 24.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I promise to try and have you all out of here by 9 o'clock tonight. So let me just first say that it has truly, been a pleasure and an honor to serve alongside each of you, all of you who I hold in high esteem. And just would say, I don't know if she's watching tonight, but also grateful to Commissioner Zonka for appointing me to serve in this capacity and also being a supporter of this proposal. Over the course of this past year, we've received, discussed, and deliberated, I think, 24 proposals since I'm the last one. Some submitted by members of this, of the public, some submitted by members of this commission. There's been some proposals that we've agreed to move forward, and there were many that were moved from consideration. But nevertheless, I think each of us have showed up and served with a purpose, even when our firmly held convictions might have resulted in compromise. So as we come to proposal number 24 this afternoon, I can unequivocally say that I've tried my best to compromise and address the concerns that were raised regarding this particular proposal. At the last meeting, there were a few concerns specifically dealing with the identified funding source that was requested of me to pinpoint. And I would just like to address just a few of them here quickly. There was a question about what county surplus real property means, right? A definition of it. And there was some research, some material that I've been studying or looking at that the Florida Housing Coalition actually provided relative to county surplus real property and how to dispose of it, right? And it is simply real property, real estate owned by the county or municipality that has been determined to no longer serve a public purpose, right? And the surplus land statutes, more specifically, Florida State Statute 125.379, requires Florida counties and municipalities to prepare an inventory list of lands owned within their respective jurisdiction and suggest methods of disposing of those lands for affordable housing. And in considering the nature of properties that might be included in a surplus lands list, it is helpful to understand how such properties came to be publicly owned in the first place, which is what Mr. Leisenfeld did today. And there are several typical ways, pathways, including tax deed, escheatment, municipal lien foreclosure, code enforcement lien foreclosure, and a direct acquisition of lands. And so local governments may also sell surplus land that is deemed unsuitable for affordable housing and use the proceeds to purchase land for the development of affordable housing or to increase public funds earmarked for affordable housing. which then leads me to a comment that was made about the proceeds from a county surplus real property sale not being able to be diverted to the trust fund if the land was sold, if the land that was sold was purchased by a particular department, since they maintain ownership of those properties. And I think some clarity needs to be provided here. There is something that is called colored money. And this is a conversation I would share that I've talked to county staff about, as well as Mr. Googleman, which are dollars that have specific and strict guidelines as to how they can be used. And these dollars are things such as ILS funds, gas tax dollars, et cetera. So obviously the proceeds from the sale of the land that was originally purchased with one of these funding sources have to go back to that pot from which it came from, because of the strict guidelines associated with it. But if that land was purchased using a general fund dollar from whatever department's budget, then there is nothing that says that those dollars cannot be diverted to another fund, right? And this policy, I think, can be shored up via the implementation of an ordinance. And then number three, which, and I'm going to touch on this document that Mr. Leisenfeld prepared for us as well. There's this notion that if the dedicated funding source doesn't generate the amount of money that we think is required to properly fund this trust fund, then it's not a good funding source, right? Therefore, we shouldn't consider it. I would say I wholeheartedly disagree with that, because if the numbers from the county in which we have those numbers today, that our surplus real property sales only generated $100,000 or whatever the case may be, that's still $100,000 more than what we currently have, right? That could be dedicated to this particular fund. And to put that into perspective for you, $100,000 can assist 4 families in terms of our county's first-time home buyer program, right? There are many questions, and I actually started going through Mr. Leisenfeld's document as we were sitting here, as he's listing the parcels and the properties that were sold over the past 5 years. There's 3 particular portions of this document that would actually be able to be diverted, the funds would be able to be diverted to the Affordable Housing or Workforce Housing Trust Fund. That's the 5 parcels, a sheet meant to the county. That revenue was $47,850 returned to the general fund, less fees. Bullet point number 2 obviously wouldn't be able to be allowed to be diverted to this fund because that property was purchased for drainage purposes. Number 3, the property that was sold to the sheriff for the expansion of Gus Hill Boulevard, that went back to the trust fund, so that could be diverted to this particular fund. The 2 parcels, Public Works Road widening on Grissom, those funds would not be able to be diverted to this particular fund because those funds were local option gas tax. Number 3, 2 court case special assessments owned, that revenue was $14,655, and those funds went to the Housing and Human Services Department. So, in what I calculated here, that is a total of $292,505 that could actually have gone to this particular trust fund. So, there are many questions, and there will continue to be many questions. But let me just say this: none of us have a magic wand, right, that we can wave and make this issue go away. None of us can even begin to understand the complexities of everything that it takes to address this affordable housing crisis. And might I add that this critical issue in our community probably doesn't even affect any of us up here. But just speaking for me now, I believe that I would simply be derelict in my duty to see that there's an issue, to know that there's an issue, and to not even address the issue. Affordable housing is like a puzzle, all right? And I've learned this. There are so many moving parts and intricate details that go into it, but every single piece has its place to help us see the bigger picture. And we very well know that if one piece of a puzzle is missing, then the puzzle is incomplete. And this has been a long and arduous process. I've had some sleepless nights. I've had more meetings than I can probably even count. I've spent at least 100+ hours trying to wrap my head around the complexities of this issue. And I've even managed to sneak a few gray hairs in over the last few months. But what I told myself time and time again was to never grow weary in well-doing. And what has kept me planted, what has kept me steadfast and unmovable, is the hope that we can and will do the right thing. What has kept me committed to this cause is knowing that out of the mountain of despair, the 12 of us, 15 if they were here, could be that stone of hope. The audacity of hope. And I can emphatically say that every sleepless night was worth it. Every meeting was worth it. Every critic was worth it. Why? Because every person that will benefit from this framework is worth it. The first responder who puts their lives on the line each and every single day, but can't even afford to live in the community that they've been called to protect and serve. I just want them to know that they're worth it. To the teacher, and might I get personal here, my wife, who has the responsibility of training up tomorrow's leaders, but yet is concerned about what tomorrow looks like for their own family. I just want them to know that they're worth it. My goodness, to the thousands of school-age children in our county living in poverty who can't do anything about the hand that they were dealt, but they have aspirations to break generational curses. I just want them to know that they're worth it. To those who, with the sweat of their brow and the work of their hands, keep our hospitality and tourism industry thriving here on the Space Coast, even if they aren't thriving themselves. I just want them to know that they're worth it. To the homeless veteran who I've said before went off to fight for this country and came home not to find a country fighting for them, I want them to know that they're worth it. To the business owner who gave up everything to keep their doors open during this pandemic to ensure that their workers could take care of their families, I just want them to know that they're worth it. To the indigent people who are looking to pick up the pieces of whatever they have left and rebuild, I just want them to know that they're worth it. To the senior citizen who is living from Social Security check to Social Security check, I just want them to know that they're worth it. And let me get real here, to every blue-collar county employee who works to ensure every day that the trains of this county run on time, I just want them to know that they're worth it. To every organization who works diligently every single day with the limited resources that they have to clothe the naked, to feed the hungry, to house the homeless, I want you all to know that you're worth it. And hopefully each and every single one of us up here will find them worth it as well. And will allow the people to decide whether or not this should be placed on our county's charter. That's the least that we can do. And I, like many of you, would like to consider myself fiscally conservative. But I understand that at the end of the day, in lieu of being fiscally conservative, above all else, I am my brother's and my sister's keeper. And I also understand that being a good steward of taxpayer dollars is actually taking care of the taxpayer who makes our community what it is. And And also what I realize is that what we have been doing for the past 15 years has not worked. It's been said plenty of times, but Albert Einstein said it the best: the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. And so let me close with this. I have gotten questioned as to why I'm trying to tackle this issue in this manner. And the answer is simple. Because my humble beginnings, Vic, it won't allow me to sit idle. And it's prepared me for this very moment. You see, I didn't have my biological mother or father in my life growing up. I was raised by my godmother, who took me in at 3 months old. This woman, Dave, was a single mother who had 2 boys of her own. And Robin, she took it upon herself to care for a baby that wasn't even hers. Sue, she worked 2 to sometimes 3 jobs to take care of her 3 boys, even if it meant that she went without. Yes, we lived in Section 8 government housing. Yes, we lived off food stamps. Yes, we lived in crime-ridden neighborhoods where gunshots sounded like fireworks on the 4th of July. But you see, Tom, this woman may not have given birth to me, but she gave me life. And every day I thank God, Blaze, for those valley moments. Because now that I'm making my way up the mountain, they have prepared me for moments like this. Mr. Kirstein, but I've also been reminded to never forget where I come from. Never to forget those valley moments. Because no one is exempt from experiencing lows. I assure you, it can happen to the best of us. And unfortunately, Mr. Herodopoulos, this woman who raised me, my mom, passed away my junior year in college. February 27, 2018 to be exact, approximately 11 days after my 21st birthday. And you know, Marcia, the toughest thing that I've done in my life, even to this very day, was deciding that I wanted to be the one to eulogize my mother. And Kendall, you can attest to this since you actually attended my mother's funeral. But the title of my eulogy was "There's No Place Like Home." And every meeting that I've had with affordable housing experts and organizations, I could just hear my mother's voice saying to me, "Jordan, there's no place like home." Every late night looking at state statute, reports, and what other counties have instituted to tackle this crisis, I could just hear my mother's voice saying to me, "Jordan, there's no place like home." Every Charter Review Commission meeting, while listening to the questions, the concerns, and public comments, I could hear my mother whispering to me, "Jordan, there's no place like home." And it goes back to what I said at the very first time that I actually introduced this item. I often think about what I want my community to look like 20 to 30 years from now. I truly want this to be the perfect community, Marie, to live, work, and play. I want our residents to be able to live out those unalienable rights that were penned in the Declaration of Independence. You know, the ones that talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I want all of those individuals that I mentioned earlier, the ones who are worth it, to look at our county and our communities and with great pride be able to say, "There's just no place like home." And I say all of that to say that I hope all of you on this dais, the ones who recognize at least that this is an issue, I think we all do, are as fired up as I am. because we have the power, although challenging, to be agents of change. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well said. Before I get to the, we have cards up here to come and speak for us. I just want to make sure I understand the proposal correctly. What its final verdict or provision is the surplus lands that we've talked about would be the dollars that would go into this fund to help out folks in need, like you talked about, correct?
Correct, or
Okay.
any other sources as established by ordinance.
Okay, perfect. All right. Rob Cramp, followed by Kristen Patchett. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. Rob Cramp, Executive Director of Housing for Homeless. I want to speak in favor of establishing this trust fund. You've heard the numbers, some of the numbers from Schimber Group out of University of Florida. If you extrapolate those numbers, we're looking at a problem this year probably of a gap of around 10,000 homes that are not being available for people who need them. 10,000 homes. Now, the private sector is doing its part. We already have 95 properties. Next year, we're going to build another 60 in Cocoa. Carrefour built 108 last year in Melbourne. And Carrefour and ourselves are competing to build another 80 in Titusville next year or the year after. But the size of the issue, if you add those together, and the public sector's helping. Palm Bay are putting $5 million aside over the next few years, which maybe build 20, 30 units. But the total sum is 310,000. It's a drop in the ocean. And we're not going to solve it by people coming up here, because what you're used to, and everybody that sits in these chairs is used to, is people coming up in here and saying, I've got a problem and I need money to solve it, or address it, or make a decision. Because the gap is too big. So what this trust fund is trying to do is not just the money, it's establishing an ongoing dialogue that you commit to, the community commits to every year, to look at how big is the problem this year, what can we do about it? That's what it's for. It's not us coming up here and saying we need money. It's an agreement to commit to us ongoing discussion for an ongoing problem. It's not going to go away. It's going to get worse. Let me leave you with this thought. I don't want to be a scaremonger, but there's an old adage that says California is the future United States. And I'm sure you've read about the tent cities in LA, San Francisco, people commuting from the valley into San Francisco 100 miles every day each way, because that's the only way they can afford to live. And we say, well, that can't happen here. Now, I lived in San Francisco 30 years ago, and it was a fabulous place to live. Affordable, fun. But 30 years ago, Silicon Valley was in Silicon Valley, and San Francisco was at the other end of the peninsula. And what's happened over the last 30 years is Silicon Valley's expanded, and then it's gobbled up San Francisco. And you think that's not happening here? You've got the Space Coast expanding. You've got highly paid engineers, just like Silicon Valley, coming in to Rockwell, to Harris, to Embraer. It's going to happen again. If we don't have a continuous dialogue, you are going to see tent cities in New Haven Avenue. And you're going to have your kids and grandkids living outside the county because they won't be able to afford to live here.
Thank you, sir. Questions? Anyway? Thank you very much for coming in today, sir. Kristen Patchett, followed by Drew Warren. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Kirsten Patchett, and I am Head of Human Resources for Embraer, who you just mentioned. And I'm coming at this from a little different perspective and speaking with you today. Embraer executive jets moved to Brevard County in 2009-2010, right after the Florida space economy was threatened with pulling of the shuttle missions. We showed up, and we have a beautiful campus at the airport. We actually love going to work every day at our campus. And it is our global headquarters for our executive aviation business. We build a plane called a Phenom and a Praetor at the site, as well as maintenance and repair of aircrafts and interior jet engineering. We employ 1,100 people, both full-time and contractor, at the site. 40% of our workforce is non-exempt employees, and they earn on average $25 an hour. And that is a pretty good wage for people to be earning, but we have struggles with them also having affordable housing. We recently shared in the news, and many of y'all may have read it, we added 150 jobs in Melbourne that we're really excited about. The majority of these are non-exempt positions, again, on the production line. Our sales and growth projections are strong. We're going to have a good next couple, 2, 3, 4 years, so we're really excited about that as well. But as we look to fill these 150 roles and other roles within the company, we struggle to find local talent, and the unemployment rate continues to be very low. Brevard is a hotspot. We all can agree that it's a pretty great place to live right now. So we have to source candidates outside of Brevard County. While we seek to look internally first, we work with Career Source Brevard, we work with FIT, we work with Eastern Florida State College. But because of low unemployment rates, and we can't always bring in entry-level talent, we have to go outside. And in going outside, over 30% of our jobs are filled by people that we recruit externally and bring into Brevard County. But what's happening to us, and the reason I'm here today, is of these people that we're trying to bring to the county, we continuously have people who drop out, who once they come and do a tour of the city, realize the cost of housing here, we lose 40% of those people. So our recruiters are constantly churning to try and find talent to come into Brevard, which we really do want. Economic Development Commission does a great job of promoting our county. We don't necessarily have all the talent here. Our unemployment rates are low. But we also need some help in having housing, affordable housing available for these people so that they come to Brevard and they also say, this is a great place for us to work. So thank you for sharing, allowing me to share a little bit different perspective on the affordable housing, on this trust that's being put out there. Please know Brevard's committed to the county. We love being here, but we do ask your help to please, consider this and vote in favor of affordable housing.
Thank you. Any questions? Thanks again for coming in. I'm sorry. Mr.
Just want to piggyback. It's more of a comment, really. I have a friend, Andres, who worked for you guys, and he would have to walk from the other side. I live over by the airport, but he'd have to walk from the other side of the airport over by the McDonald's over to your campus because he couldn't afford a place to live, and he was paying about $600 more than my mortgage. So you guys really go through a lot in order to get good talent here and do that. And they love your company, but
Right.
it is a very important issue. So I do appreciate you coming specifically and speaking on this. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Drew Warren, followed by Brittany. Looks like App. Followed by Jade Thompson. Welcome, Mr. Warren.
Hello. Thank you for letting me get up here and talk a little bit. I'm Drew Warren. I'm Executive Director of Community of Hope. I just want to say I know that affordable housing is something that everyone up here understands as an issue, and I know that all of you want to do something about it. I think there are 3 basic obstacles to doing it, at least from your perspective, and maybe I'm wrong, so educate me. One is you don't see it as fiscally conservative, and I think I see that point. I happen to be fiscally conservative myself. I just disagree with it. I disagree because I've been educated enough in affordable housing to see that without affordable housing, the costs in other spheres of life go up so much that that the impact of affordable housing actually decreases the cost of the community. So the other 2 reasons why I think you would be opposed. One is the is this the right forum? I think that's a question, and I think I don't know if any of you have ever, if you remember reading, Put Me in the Zoo as a kid. The main character, of course, is wants to be in the zoo. So he goes and all the zookeepers keep telling him, this isn't the place for you. This isn't the place for you. Well, I love the moral of the story at the end is there is a place for everybody. There's a home for everybody. But I think to your all's perspective, you think this isn't the place to address that. And to some extent, I think you're right. The problem is it has to get through you all to get to the place where it should be addressed. And where it should be addressed is with the voters. You all have the ability to put this through and let the voters make the decision. This isn't for this panel to decide. This panel gets to put it through and let the public decide. The other kind of stumbling block for this, I think, is the funding source. And I would say funding source probably does not particularly, I don't think that should be something that we stumble over. I think the county commission, if they're empowered to make this an item, as Rob Cramp mentioned, that is annually assessed, and annually they decide what pocket of funds to pull from to put toward it. I think that's enough. I have my own opinions on where we could find some funding for this. And I'll gladly speak to that, but my time is about up. But I do think you all have the power to put this forward to let the voters make a decision. And I think that's within what, if I were in your shoes, I would want to do, is let this go through the voters.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Other questions? Ms. Newman?
A question on where the funding would be going. Would you, in your perspective, is it more important for it to go to the nonprofit groups? There's a lot of nonprofit groups here, or would it be to be going towards subsidizing buildings so that we could have more affordable places for people to live? I feel like we're going to have from your perspective, yes, we have the opportunity to do this, but I think it's really important that we also discuss here, because it's going to be more for what that vision is, going to the voters, going to the county commission of the thing. What would be the most impactful way to use these funds?
Well, I think we already have mechanisms in place, and I think if you put this through and let the Housing and Human Services administer under the county commission's oversight, I think there's already that mechanism. As for where those funds would go, that would be decided on an annual basis. I do think there are lots of nonprofit developers, as Rob Cramp from Housing for Homeless mentioned. They've done some development. We've done some development. I think there are lots of opportunities to build more affordable housing that this community can be proud of, and I think the nonprofits can be a part of that. But I think for-profit corporations coming in and doing development, as long as it's dedicated to those under the 80% LMI, I think there's, or AMI, I think there's plenty of opportunity to do this. So,
thank you.
Other questions? Well, thank you, Mr. Warren.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
your
much.
service. Thank you, sir. Brittany, followed by Jay Thompson, followed by John Tavis Smith. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Brittany Arp. I'm a tenant with Community Hope. Drew Warren's my manager. So in October of 2018, my daughter and I took a midnight bus from Georgia to Florida to start over. We had literally nothing. After a long ride, After a long ride and 3 days in Orlando, we finally made it to Melbourne. We were dropped off at the old Waffle House off 192 in New Haven. 2 Waffle House waitresses came to our rescue. I had no idea where to go, but they did. They fed us and drove us to Genesis House. Genesis House accepted us, and it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt safe and relieved. Genesis Health helped me enroll in school at Eastern Florida. I graduate in December. Late 2018, my husband decides to travel to Florida to be with me and my daughter. He slept outdoors for the first 6 to 7 months, taking showers at Daily Bread and holding a job at a call center. In May of 2019, we are accepted into Community of Hope. We were finally going to be together in an apartment. I remember hopping from room to room because I was so excited. I was so excited to have somewhere to call home. Community of Hope gave us affordable housing. We were able to save and buy a car in 2020. We wouldn't have been able to buy a car if it wasn't for Community of Hope. We saved so much money. My family and I were together and happy in our own place. It was wonderful for our self-esteem and our drive to do better. In May of 2021, 2 months before our apartment lease is up, Mr. Drew asked my husband and I if we would be up for moving before August. Mr. Drew tells us we have a house opening up and I think y'all would be perfect for it. We're on our 2nd year in this beautiful house. Never in my life would I have thought we would be living in a house we can afford. Community of Hope has given my family the means to be stable again. My husband and I have goals that can be obtained now. We are saving to buy our own home. We would be first-time home buyers. That seems like a faraway dream just 4 years ago. The Affordable Housing Fund has given Community of Hope homes to needy families like mine. Homes that are affordable. It's hard and expensive to start over. Community of Hope gives my family and other families a leg up to success. Without them and the funds, my husband and I would have had to pay and struggle so much more. They gave us peace of mind and a chance to better ourselves. Thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to start over the right way, and I appreciate you guys. Thank you for listening to me today.
Well, thank you, Ms. Arp, and congratulations on your success.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Jade Thompson. Welcome, Ms. Thompson.
Hello, my name is Jay Thompson, and I'm a housing coordinator at a clinic. I just want to say a comment. It's more, I work on a daily basis with clients that have medical needs, so they live off Social Security. We just got funding. I have nowhere to put any of our clients. There is waiting lists for any new building that was put up. They're already a year backed up. So you made a comment. I truly believe it's more of the buildings to get them in. Most people on Social Security is at $841 a month. They can't, we at mercies of landlords right now. It's a lot more heartbreaking when you talk to them and go out to the hotels and you see their children. It's just a little bit more when you're on the front lines dealing with it. That's it.
Thank you so much. John Tavius Smith. Welcome, Mr. Smith.
Thank you for having me, Dontavius Smith, Cocoa, Florida. I got to empathize with my brother Jordan. It's worth it. It's worth it. There is no way I can be on vacation, on a 10-day vacation in Brazil and Cartagena, Colombia, and worry about Brevard County. I'm sitting here in a bungalow with Brazilian citizens around me with guns, shooting heroin, all kind of life around me. And I'm sitting here creating a proposal to help homelessness and the impoverished issue in my county, the county that raised me, the county that sent me to Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University to come back, to think about them, to influence. Brother Jordan, it's worth it. Because my mama, my grandmama, had to clean houses, had to go work, had to grind. But me and my little brother, Commission, with all due respect, this fund is much needed. It's not so much more than a fund to create money to give to people who are homeless or who don't want to work, who don't want to earn a sustainable living. This is why I proposed the Operation Leg Up Brevard program. I didn't know about a lot of this surplus funding and a lot of land and a lot of land uses. I didn't know a lot of these things. All I knew is I wanted to help. I knew there was an issue. I knew there was a problem. So I had to do what I could in my heart to provide a solution. This fund is much needed for the citizens and the future citizens of Brevard County, because other than this, I don't see us getting a leg up. Yeah, us, because I'm including myself in this. I don't see us getting a leg up and earning a livelihood to even sustain a living wage, yet better alone a living livelihood. Put this fund on the ballot. There it is. You're running with the mayor. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Smith. All right, there. I have no more appearance cards. Could I, Mr. Warren, could you mind coming back up? I just have a couple questions for you, just to understand this a little bit better, because we've had a lot of this. I think this is our 4th or 5th meeting on the issue. So the amazing story of Ms. Arp and her family is great to hear. Could you just walk us through a little bit on how this works? Meaning, is this subsidized by you all, or these people pay a reduced amount? How does it kind of work? In your, I know there's other groups out there. Yeah.
So we get a lot of private funding, and most of what we do within our own housing is subsidized by that private funding. Mm-hmm. So someone comes into, and some of it is grant funds, but somebody comes into our transitional housing, for example, they only pay a percentage of their income. Okay. So if they're making $1,000 a month, they can pay up to $333 a month, and that includes their rent and utilities. Okay. In our particular case. Mm-hmm. Then we have longer term affordable housing that they do have to be able to pay a low cost rental, but that's I think our maximum is $800, and that includes their utilities as well and internet. So as far as the funds administered by this trust fund, I see this as going to the bigger problem, which is the stock. No matter how much we help, there's not enough affordable housing stock inventory to address the problem, because they can stay with us. Ms. Arp and her family will be moving out. They will be buying a house, and that will free up a unit. But if there's no place for people to go, they're going to languish in programs like ours. Thankfully, we don't allow that to really happen. We work with them hard, and we get them to be able to move on. But there's just not enough beds for the families and the individuals and the transition-aged youth, because we do have a lot of those 18 to 24-year-olds that we also work with, that there's just no place for them to go. And our units are taken up by people who can't move on because there's no inventory. So what we would want this fund to do is to give that seed money to developers, whether for-profit or not-for-profit, to be able to develop more housing that's dedicated to people on low income.
Okay. Well, that helps. I just want to get, and yours is somewhat typical of the other groups they're trying to help as well, is that there's a person would pay a percentage of their income. They're not just getting free housing, they're contributing towards their long-term goal as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, that helps. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Meyer. I appreciate you clarifying that for us. All right, we're on the proposal brought forth by Mr. Chandler. Are there questions for the sponsor of the proposal or debate? Ms. Lubecker, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jordan, great job you've done on this. You've worked very, very hard. As you know, or as Florida Today said, I was the fiscal conservative that's opposed to this. That's not the case. I called them, had them correct that. But I also, as I went through this process, I want to make sure I'm not making an emotional decision on a hard problem. For me, you've checked all the boxes, and I'm in favor of this, and I'm going to explain why, because I think some folks are going to scratch their heads. Similar situation like you. I'm not going to get into the details, but same thing, just 30 years prior. So I know that situation. You're not asking us here to solve this problem. You're asking us to give the county commissioners another arrow in their quiver to tackle this problem and allow the voters to decide. That's all you're doing. My big worry was, is this going to be a tax reach? It's not. It's discretionary money. There's not one penny of single burden on the taxpayers. The commissioners can do the $292,500 a year, or they can do $150 million a year. Well, not that much in the general fund, but you know what I mean. And every year as they go through the budget process, it's all about priorities. This is going to be a priority. It's not going away, as you said. I actually believe this is going to be a front burner issue for years to come. So that said, I looked at it from this perspective. Sometime the commissioners are going to say we need a shiny new fire engine some years. And other years they're going to say, you know what, we need firefighters. And in order to do that, we got to make sure they can live here because the wages ain't keeping up. Wages are doing this, inflation is doing this, and wages are doing that. Housing, same way. I know, I just sold my house. I had it for 2 years, and I'm shocked at the difference in 2 years of what that went by. And I also know the buyer pool of what I sold my house for, $50,000 a year, you weren't even going to come close. So that said, I think you did a great job on this, and I look at this very pragmatically, and I say give the commissioners the power every year to decide as they go through the budget process to decide how they want to tackle this. None of us need to worry about how to crack that nut. We don't need to talk ourselves out of this. Let them figure out every year how they want to do it. So that's where I'm at.
Others in discussion? Mr. Tredis, yes.
Yeah, I think today was the first day that I was able to see the amount of money that this surplus property brings in. I don't think it was received by email earlier. I think today, and I was really sad to see it because I would like to vote for this proposal because I don't think it's a matter of fiscal conservatism. You know, this money that's from the sale of property, I don't think would affect the county with its big budget. But the problem I'm having is that there needs to be some real money that this would go towards solving a very big problem. And I personally just don't consider less than $60,000 a year enough money to justify a vote for the proposal. And I don't like the virtue signal and vote for something simply because I want to prove I'm a good person or I'm compassionate. It gets down to the realities of looking what's before us. This is a dedicated funding source. That's really what this proposal is. And it's averaged less than $60,000 per year. That would not build a single house. It would probably pay for 3 apartments per year on average. The county already has an affordable housing trust fund. It's in place, it's written, they can fund it right now however they'd like. So this proposal, really, I don't see adding anything to that either. It's already in place. To me, this all comes down to what is the dedicated funding source. If this surplus property had brought in $1 million per year on average for 5 years or $500,000 on average for 5 years, I would vote for it immediately. But when I saw that it's bringing in less than $60,000 per year, I just don't see, unfortunately, that it brings in enough money to make it worthwhile. I'm sure there's also all kinds of, government costs that would have to go with this. But unfortunately, I was hoping to see a big number, and I'm seeing a very small number. And I wanted to explain why I feel compelled to vote no. Thank you.
Others in discussion? Mr. Newman?
I'd like to jump off of Blaze's point for a minute and talk to staff for a minute. In regards to that funding, how much staff time do you think would eat into that? Like, just a roundabout, would there be a significant amount that would take out of that $60,000 for staff expenses to keep this thing running? Like, are we talking about, half of that goes to management? I just generally, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just really curious.
I don't really have that answer. I'd be surprised if it would be through the Housing and Human Services Department. From what I've seen in their budget, I'd be surprised if they're drawing any personnel expenses out of that number. I believe it all goes to programs on rehab and repair of houses right now.
All right.
I have a question based on what Mr. Tredis asked. Jordan, is there an existing fund now?
There is an affordable housing trust fund, which, I made that comment several times. It was established via ordinance back in 2007, right? And I was actually under the impression that that particular ordinance had a dedicated funding source, right, which was PILT, payment in lieu of taxes. But after doing some further, due diligence in terms of that, there is no permanent funding source for that. Somehow, I don't know if it's administratively, it was just decided that PILT funds would be dedicated to that particular affordable housing trust fund. And so, I think, and I do welcome, the comments from, Mr. Tredis, but I think the notion that, just because what we've seen historically that these funds or the sale of surplus land has not generated the amount that we think is necessary to properly fund this proposal or this trust fund, you know, I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there may be other opportunities. For example, you know, like I said before, I think there's 200 properties per my conversation with asset management, and so who's to say that those lands won't sell, right? And so for us to, like I said, throw the baby out with the bathwater just because of this particular dedicated funding source, I just don't think that's, you know, that's right. So.
Okay, good, thank you. And maybe Mr. Jenkins can help me with this question. Is right now there's that trust fund, and I think it's a very valid idea that surplus real property could be. We finally have a dedicated source. That's your goal, right?
Or any other sources as established by ordinance.
Yeah, I get
right?
that part. That's the, it's necessary and proper clause. I get it. So, Mr. Jenkins, if the county commission, they obviously, Ms. Zonka and others have been very interested in this program. If they wanted to, without having to go through this process, are they allowed to add the two provisions that Mr. Chandler's talking about, which I think are a solid idea, on the county commission to the existing trust fund?
Yes, they could do it legislatively.
Yeah, just but passing a majority vote. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, you know, and my concern is, though, we need something that is permanent. We've had a lot of discussion up here today about, you know, term limits, individuals coming into office, and my concern is that if this was just baked in via an ordinance, right, it gives them the liberty to do what they want, right? Ordinances can be repealed and replaced at any time, but this is something that's concrete. And so I think we really need to consider that, because there may be individuals, other you know, county commissioners who may come in and say, well, it's not a priority of mine, so let's get rid of it, right? And to me, to me, that is one of my gravest concerns. So once again, this is creating permanency.
I see your point. Don't get me wrong. Again, I don't have a problem with putting this on the ballot myself. I'm just trying to be pragmatic in the sense that the key provision is not necessarily the surplus real property, because there's not much money there. But as you just said, it's by ordinance, you can do this currently. And again, I also think that, again, I'm trying to be your lifeline here, is I think if you have 15 people here, you might get 10 votes as opposed to 12 people being here. Could be wrong. But that said, I'm trying to ask Mr. Jenkins and other people who have been on the county commission, I never have, is I think this is a tool I'd be happy to give the county commission if they want to use certain funds. I don't want to use, quote, tax dollars, new taxes to do it, but if there are surplus property, et cetera, and people recognize what it's for, I don't have a problem with it. But I also don't want to have to pass something really big for something that 3 county commissioners could put into place, because I think your idea is absolutely solid, and I appreciate the fact that, you know, I've been kind of your toughest questioner through this process, and I've asked you to tighten it up, and I think you have, so you've met my standard. But I just want to, maybe if I can get some comments from either Ms. Schmidt or Mr. Fisher or Mr. Jenkins, who have a lot more experience on the commission than I do, of how they kind of see this. It might give direction to those of us who aren't in the day-to-day activities of the county.
Mr. Chairman, can I say one thing before you get to the experts? I'm going to save those 3 experts over there for last. In full disclosure, on bullet number 3, which is the Gus Hitt property, we actually represented the purchaser in that property. And one of the things that I think, and I didn't think of this before just now, could make that number ultimately grow over time, is the county has a large number of parcels, but they are not declared a surplus. This particular property was a property that was in the county's inventory that had not been declared a surplus, and the county has an ordinance that talks about how you declare a property a surplus. So we went through the process to have that declared as surplus, and then ultimately was able to purchase it through an open process that's established, you know, ultimately by ordinance. And so I do think that it's not necessarily true that we're limited to what exists on the surplus property list today. That list would ultimately, or could grow, either by individuals wanting to purchase those properties, or for those properties being considered, I think as the statute says, for use by affordable housing developers, and the sale of that money to an affordable housing developer would ultimately yield that in the trust fund. So I think that, to Mr. Tredis's point, you would want to see a larger number, but that could happen based upon based upon properties currently in the counties that are sitting there that they currently own, but that are not labeled as surplus today.
And let me just echo that, because I know I've approached the school board, they have a lot
Correct.
of surplus properties. We approached them with a few ideas to help out with the workforce housing, et cetera. And they're, at this juncture, they've chosen not to put those out in the marketplace. I know in Rockledge and Melbourne and other areas, so it could be another viable option. At the very least, if they give that land for free, the cost of affordable housing on that property would go down dramatically. So, yeah. Mr. Fisher?
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question, because it's going to be applicable to all three? Just throw it out
Sure.
there so that they can address it with their expertise.
please.
As you look at this, as you explain this to us, maybe help everybody understand the color of money in the county, and that it's not just limited to just selling some land. There's other options available, and money leverages money. Money gets us money from the state. Money gets us money from the feds. Money gets us money from private developers. So this could be much bigger. So if you guys would address that with your expertise in mind.
I mean, I think you could probably take the CARE Act's money that's been allocated to the county, and if they want to put some towards affordable housing and put it, the seed at the trust fund, they could do that if that is what county commissioners wanted to do. Let me see if I understand something, though, because, I lived through the time of 2008 to 16 and through 8 to 2008, 9, 10, and 11. We were trying to sell some of our property, and we actually went and got appraisals on it to help balance the budget, because it was financially tough at that time. And there are some property that the county owned that has some value that, for example, I think there's 5 or 6 acres on the ocean in Cocoa Beach that's been sitting vacant for, 30 years. We bought it. If you establish this ordinance, if the county ever decided to say they want to sell that piece of property, does this ordinance says that, and let's say it's a $2 million value because it's on the ocean, do you automatically have to be committed to put that value into the trust fund if this ordinance passed?
It should be charter passed.
Maybe, yeah, I mean, Jordan's proposal.
Yeah.
It would not. The way this is written, it's discretionary by the county commission.
Okay. So it's not all surplus property
It's not
automatically go
not
there?
mandated, it's an
Discretion.
option.
It's an option.
As are
Okay.
other funding sources, an option.
Okay, yeah. So, I'm okay with the way it's written then. I mean, I think there's going to be times that commissioners are going to have the flexibility to, balance budgets and do things. And so if it's not mandatory that every sale of every property has to go into this fund, I'm comfortable.
Mr. Chair, can I say I disagree with that? That's the dedicated funding source, surplus property. The proposal says that that's how it's funded, to the sale of surplus property. There's no exception. There's no discretion in the wording. Looks mandatory to me.
That's how I thought it was, but.
No, it says, and may be comprised of the following sources. Maybe, to me, means
So you're
it
looking
can
at,
be.
and just to clarify, Mr. Chickens, you're looking at point C, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So read that whole sentence for us, if you don't mind. The trust fund established under this section shall be funded as directed by the county commission and may be comprised of the following sources. So it's a may, not a shall.
That's the way
Do you
I
see
read
that
it.
as a shall, Mr. Tredis? Or do you see that, you read it as a may or a shall?
Well, I think it's a little bit confusing because it seems to me like you got to dedicate county surplus money if you're going to do it. If you're going to sell it, that's where it needs to. I'm not sure.
Okay, sure. Again, the whole point of this exercise is to give clarity, right? That's what we're trying to do for you. And, but I read it as may, I read it as you do, but if you see it differently, I think what I'm getting from the commissioners is they want the flexibility as opposed to absolutely saying every piece of surplus property must go to affordable housing?
Mr. Chair? I apologize.
Yeah.
I think just 2 simple words inserted might solve this.
Okay.
If you're interested, Jordan. Just put funds may be used from the sale of, that's it. Just insert right after funds. Funds may be, or may come from the sale of county surplus real property and. I think that solves the language issue.
Yeah, the only shall I see is in the section talking about they're establishing the trust fund.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to comment that I think the only value is that this, of the proposal, since there's already an affordable housing trust fund, is to create a dedicated funding source. If it's discretionary work the county commission, I don't see the value. It's like they can already do that now with the existing affordable housing trust fund.
Sure.
So if this is discretionary, I mean, the only value I saw was it was a dedicated funding source. It wasn't nearly enough for me to vote for it. But if it's discretionary, then what value does it have?
But do you want to change it to shall then?
No, because it's not enough. If it were for $500,000 or $1 million a year, I would. But it's not enough for me to justify voting for it, even if it were shall.
Okay, good point. Ms. Schmidt?
Yes. A lot of people have said a lot of things, and to me, I know that right now there's a huge workforce need out there, whether it be teachers or nurses or a lot of people, plumbers, no matter who it is. And you never want to say that you might be the only person that went through a lot, because there's a lot of people, and I'm going to raise my hand, that have gone through a variety of things in their life. But I do know that I have been out because I do believe there is a huge need in the community, and mainly because of inflation and things and property values. I mean, rent, whether it's owning a home, doesn't matter which one it is. And I think it's great that people are able to make money and have places, but I also know that there's an awful lot of people out there that are working. And I'm not talking about somebody that doesn't want to work. I'm talking about people that want to be out there working, or if in fact they happen to be a senior and they're on a very limited income. That's a huge problem right now. But I have been talking to a variety of people, and I believe some other things can be done to assist. And certainly after we're out of sunshine, I would be more than happy to sit down with Jordan, because I know how important it is, not just to him, but to this community. But if you want to do certain things right now, all you have to do is call up 4 county commissioners right now and say that you want something, go and meet with them and get it on their agenda and get them to commit to putting certain funds, whether it's funds from the sale of properties or if it's something else, and let them do it at 2 meetings from now and get it done. I just don't think this is the way to do it, but I do believe there are ways and things that can be done to help this whole process. But number one, I don't think this would pass. But number two, that's not the important part at this point. I just think you can get it done what you need to have done by going to the commissioners right now. But I also do believe there's other things that can be done to assist rentals, and also building.
Other discussion? Mr. Chairman.
I was going to, I thought I was in a courtroom for a second. I was going to say objection because I don't think we should make assumptions about if it should pass or not. Once again, I think Mr. Warren said it best. That's not for us to decide, right? The question is to put it on the ballot and let the people decide if this is something that is of importance to them, right? So I just don't think that we need to make undue assumptions about whether it would pass or not, because I just tell you from the conversations I've had with quite a few individuals, and I'm not going at you, Ms. Schmidt. I know you've talked to quite a few people as well, and I want to clear something up. I wasn't speaking today, as if I'm the only one up here that experienced something, right? I'm just telling my story and why it's important to me, right? And so I just wanted to clarify that. But once again, I just don't think that we need to, make those assumptions about whether this would pass or not. So, thank you.
Well, I'll be brief. I mean, you got to start somewhere, and something's better than nothing, so.
All right, anybody else in discussion?
Sir?
Sir?
So,
Mr. Newman.
so my thoughts on this are essentially, one, let me back up for a second. When I grew up in the nonprofit sector in my career, when I see nonprofits coming up and saying, hey, we need to solve this problem, and it's not by necessarily giving us money, but it's by solving an issue in the market economy, that's a big deal. Like, I had to write grants for these folks, and that is not something that happens lightly. Like, they do not come out here and just, say, oh, hey, by the way, like, give this money to somebody else because, we're full, we're good, we took care of everybody. That's not how that works. And this is something that I've researched and deep dived into myself, and you can, if Jordan, you had a plot of land and you wanted to say, hey, I have enough room for a small little utility property that, I can't afford it, you can't afford it because just, you have to build a new thing, you're not going to be able to get any funding or help from your city, your county, or your state. I've looked at all three options. For the most part, you'll get a really clean tax break, it'll be really sweet, but an average person is not going to be able to do that, and we're not going to be doing anything if we don't put something out there that the county has to act on. And I don't like putting programs in constitutions or in charters. I think that is definitely a legislative process. But what this is doing is this is actually forcing, and a very, very forward thinking, this is not going to solve the problem tomorrow, next week, next month. This is going to make it where 10 to 20 years from now, we're probably a leader in places that people want to live, work, and play. Like, that is actually what this will do. And this will force the county commission to have to either find dedicated funding sources, not taxes. I will not vote for this and say that I want a tax. I do not, and I hope they never turn this into a tax. However, it should be through this dedicated source that we have, which is surplus lands, and it should be a shell on here that it must be addressed and it must be put into the budget so that every year this accumulates so that maybe 10 years down the road, you have 600,000, $1 million, you have money to put into these developers to say, okay, here's these guidelines you have to make, but guess what? We can have people that are working class that can live in this community, or else we'll be a very, very exclusive beach town if we don't do this.
Mr. Tredis.
I made this point last time, I'll make it again. The ordinance, or excuse me, the proposal as written does not require the county commission to do anything. And that is because of paragraph, well, it's the last paragraph, which says that no later than July 1, 2023, the county commission shall adopt one or more ordinances implementing the provisions of the section and/or strictly, and here's the important part, and/or strictly enforce existing ordinances. So the county commission could say, okay, we're not going to do anything because we strictly enforced existing county ordinances. Doesn't require them to do a thing.
Theoretically, though, they'd be forced to put the money in the pot, though.
No, they're not. Not required to do a thing.
If we put shall in there, that's my reading of it, that you would be able to put money aside, and so at some point down the road, they will want to access that pot of money.
It says implementation by ordinance, and it says they shall adopt ordinances or strictly enforce existing ordinances.
Let me just interject here. I think to the question I've asked, and I think you're saying it as well, Ms. Schmidt, which is you'd like to see the county commission do the two things you're asking for, right? I mean, you're saying funds from sale of county surplus real property or other sources, right? And it does, using that necessary proper clause again in a very liberal way, as Mr. Tredis is bringing up, that's their get at it. So you don't enshrine it in the charter. Section F, the last one there, basically tells them if you do this, you've met the requirements according to the charter in my reading of it. Do I read that wrong?
Maybe we're on different, wavelengths here. A charter amendment is something that's concrete. I think that everything that's in the charter right now, the county commission must abide by, right? And if they don't, then there's, you know, I would say consequences or for that. Prime example is the charter cap, right? The busting of that. So once again, there are particular details that would have to be, excuse me, implemented by ordinance, and that would simply, you know, be a work with the Housing and Human Services Department. And I don't work in the Housing and Human Services Department, so I can't even tell you the complexities of what they think that this charter amendment would necessitate in order to make sure that it's effective for the people. So that's why that particular clause, implementation by ordinance, because the what's going to happen is once this is passed, the county commission is going to say, hey, Housing and Human Services Department, bring back something to us, right, that's going to make sense, right, to make sure that we're abiding by this charter amendment that was passed by the voters.
Okay.
If it's passed by the voters.
Yeah, I see your point. I mean, look, you put something in the Constitution that's a heck of a lot stronger than a law, what you're really saying. But, and in the many meetings you've had, which is great, have you had meetings with 3 county commissioners who said they'd pass this?
I have spoken to all of the county commissioners. Okay. And there is a little bit of, you know, hesitation. You know, one of the things that we, you know, face right now is obviously the lack of having a full county commission, right? But I've had conversations with some of the commissioners. Actually, let me back up. Not all. 3 of them, and 3 of them said that they, you know, would like to do something. So relative to affordable housing, which I think, you know, it's been a topic of discussion here at County Commission just as of recently, just a few days ago, right? One commissioner very well talked about a particular agency and said, hey, I think those funds that you're using could potentially go towards affordable housing, right? And so once again, if the county commission says, hey, you know, I think that may be a particular viable funding source, then once again, it gives them the flexibility of any other sources as established by ordinance, right? And so that's why, once again, that clause in there, Clause E, implementation by ordinance. So, you know.
Okay.
Question.
I'm sure. I'll get you next.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Jenkins, I think some of the property was acquired through either referendum, some was acquired for like beach acquisition funds and stuff like that. And making reference to one of the properties that the county owned, I know has a lot of value and nothing's been happening to it, which could probably seed this fund early with a couple $1 million. But doesn't by law, does that money have to go back to beach acquisition? You can't take those funds and just put it in here. Do you know?
I don't know the legal answer to that. I do know that funds that are secured, or property that's secured for the solid waste fund, the utilities department fund, those funds are clearly committed to the enterprise fund that owns it. In the case of anything funded from ad valorem tax, I'm not sure once you get through the initial purpose, if it's resold, I'm not sure if you can divert that money away from the EELS program or away from beach and riverfront. However, having said that, it's highly probable that the Board of County Commissioners would feel as a commitment to the voters who voted to buy environmentally endangered lands to continue to use those funds for environmentally endangered lands. But the point that I wanted to make, it says this shall be funded as directed by the county commission. Well, the county commission could direct to put $10 a year in that fund. I mean, there's nothing that says what's going to go into the fund. The way I read it, it's discretionary by the county commission. They're going to determine the funding. It says it shall be funded. The language is almost contradictory. Shall means it will happen. Making it as directed by the county commission. The other thing that's a little confusing is that budgetary things are not necessarily done by ordinance. They're done by resolution. they're done by various other legal mechanisms. So, and ordinances are not necessarily a requirement to fund something. So in some cases, it could be if you passed a new fee or something, you potentially could have to have an ordinance, but appropriating funding is not necessarily bound by passing an ordinance. So some of that language is not quite crisp.
I think I understand where Blaze is coming from. He does a very good job as a lawyer. He reads every word, and that's what he's doing. He's looking at this in a very legal perspective. And the and/or is kind of tripping you up, I think, in Section F.
Yep.
As I understand it. The and/or is going to trip you up. And potentially saying shall strictly enforce existing ordinances, will strictly enforce, but the and/or is what's tripping you up.
You all keep saying Section F. I'm not.
It's the last
you mean
section, the
Section E? Implementation, Section
The
E.
implementation, yeah.
Okay.
Last thing in,
Got it. Okay.
Well, excuse me, can I interject? I would rather not table this. I'd rather vote on it today because I don't know, there's not many changes being suggested or even any, I think anyone saying they want to make a change. But I guess I'll propose one now, even though I've already stated my vote. To solve this and/or problem, why not just eliminate everything after provisions of this section? Just, if this passes, County Commission, you gotta pass the ordinance implementing it, period.
Yeah.
Yes.
You really don't need to reference prior votes, or, yeah.
okay, so we could do, again, it's however we want to move together as a commission. We can vote on whether to table or not, or we can vote today. We can do whatever we like. That's the beauty of this thing. So, Mr. Chairman, what's your pleasure? Would you like to have a vote today, or you want to make a motion to table it? What's your pleasure? What's your proposal?
Well, I definitely think there were some valid points made relative to some changes to, once again, tighten up that language.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one valid one made by Mr. Tredis. I think we know what his vote is going to be. I think that's been clear since the beginning. So I would like to motion to, table this until the next meeting, just like the other proposals that we had here today, who would give an opportunity to kick it to the next meeting. Thank you.
All right.
I'll second that
Okay.
because I believe that you deserve the right, if you want to change something.
I will do a voice
then you
vote
can.
first, and if it's close, we'll call a roll call. All those in favor of tabling this amendment say yay.
Yay.
All those opposed say nay. The yeas have it, so we're going to table that. Can I make one suggestion? You put a lot of work into this. You clearly have the relationships with the county commissioners. There are county commission meetings between now and our next meeting. I think this should be brought up, and I'd love to get their opinion on this because clearly affordable housing is a very serious issue. But as the experienced members of this committee have talked about, that as important an issue this is, this should be an ordinance. And if we want to give it more strength, of course, that's what the charter would provide. But I'd love to get their opinion on it, and then they could probably hash out a lot of these facts as well, because I can tell you, as Mr. Fisher brought up, when we put Preservation 2000 money to buy up that beachfront property, it was so there was no growth on that beachfront property. So when you drive down A1A, you can see the beach as opposed to what you have in Fort Lauderdale. And I'd be the first one to go ape if they tried to build buildings on that land that's supposed to be preserved, because that's what makes Brevard such a great place to live. I don't want that to be a surplus property. I want that to be vacant property, so it's beachfront. So we need to be very careful about how we tread here on some of these ideas, because today's really important issue might not be the next. But that said, we'll table it for next time, but it also means, Mr. Chandler, you're going to have your ballot language geared up and ready to go, because this is our last meeting. We've had some discussions about additional meetings. I don't want to have an additional meeting. I want to have our vote next time, and if you make it, you make it. If you don't, you don't. But that ballot language needs to be really clear, and you need to come to a really strong conclusion of how you want to implement this, because I think it's come a long way. I'm willing to support this, but I'm trying to be the pragmatist here and say you can get this done in ordinance, in my opinion. And it's not as strong as the charter, don't get me wrong, but it would give more strength to your goal, which is all of our goal, which is to help folks out who are hardworking, trying to move up and that next rung of the ladder. So I think this is a great idea. It's just, as we're all trying to work through it, it's the technical parts that sometimes get in the way.
One thing for Chairman. I was just going to say, Mr. Jordan, I think you also look at, you're talking about surplus property and a sale of it and the proceeds going there. I think the county has some residential lots that they own that those ought to be considered for affordable housing. And it's not, and I think that's an easier sell too. And maybe you just add it to this proposal, but if you go through the list and they probably can help you, there are a lot of residential lots that butt up to another residential home that's sitting out there that it's going to mean you're going to need land and inventory to meet this need. If you can take some of those lots and use them and let somebody put something on it, I think you'll get a more bang for your bucks too.
Good point. Ms. Jenkins?
We're not allowed to discuss this topic outside this arena, but I do think the language needs to be tightened up, and I don't know if Mr. Gugelman can help him or the county attorney, but some of this I think needs to be cleared up. It's a little confusing, shall and as directed by and by ordinance. I mean, I don't know where the ordinance, it may or may not come into play. It could be a budget resolution, it could be a grant, community development block grant, it could be a lot of things.
And if he doesn't mind, Mr. Gugelman, I will reach out to you, and I'll say this, I'm not an attorney. I do have a pre-law degree, but I will definitely reach out to him to try and tighten that up. Appreciate it.
All right, so this proposal tabled to next time, and again, our last meeting, and hopefully we can find a way to make this work out in the best way possible. Okay, we are done with the proposals. We are now going to move on to our additional business. Let me get this in front of me. We're in public comment, which is section G. There's no other cards in front of me for public comment. We don't have any unfinished business, so we're going to move to new business, which is to review and vote to approve ballot language for the following. Could we take a recess for maybe 15 minutes? We've been at it for almost 3 hours. Is any objection to taking a 15-minute recess? Without objection, we're going to recess for 15 minutes, and then we'll take up our new business. And we're going to take up the new business on the ballot language. So let's take up our first measure. I don't know why I'm not finding it. Oh, it's in my other notes, okay. That is on proposal CRC Resolution 001, three-panel attorney. Mr. Googleman, if you would help us out with that, that'd be great.
Yes, sir. You'll see on page 2, section 2, identifies the actual amendatory language that you all have adopted by in excess of 10 votes. Page 3, at the top of page 3, is the ballot question, and I think that's language that Mr. Tredis, this is his proposal, by the way, and he wanted to use that ballot language, which I certainly have no objection to. And so I think all you need to do is just adopt the resolution.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
How do we determine whether it's returned to the county commission or to the CRC? Who makes that determination?
Well, you have another amendment further on. If that passes, that'll help define that. If, for example, if the panel, the three-member panel, finds something inconsistent with the law or whatever, that proposal then gets returned to the CRC, and that is, I think it may be, is it 4? It's resolution number 4.
Well, should we make them consistent?
Can I interject here? Thank you. The reason that it's written the way that it is because the 3 attorney review panel applies to both charter amendment proposals by the Board of County Commissioners and the Charter Review Commission.
Correct.
So if the proposal came from the Charter Review Commission, it would go back to the Charter Review Commission. If it came from the County Commission, it would go back to the County Commission.
Which seems logical, but how would you know that 5 years from now?
Well, when it happens, you know it because it's pending.
I mean, where is that defined? What you just said to me, which makes sense, where is that
It's
defined?
in the charter. It's in the charter now.
So what the charter says is what, that the either or can submit amendments to the charter, correct?
Right.
Does it specify the 3 panel?
Both go to the 3 attorney member
They
panel.
both say that,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and I think, and if it was a county commission proposal, it obviously, and it went to the attorney panel, and the attorney panel said, though, this is a no-go. They wouldn't obviously return it to the Charter Review Commission because there wouldn't be one. You'd get returned to county commission.
Okay.
All right, further questions on this first proposal, on the language? Do we need a roll call vote, or I can do by voice?
Voice.
Okay, if then, all those in favor, say yay.
Yay.
All those opposed, say nay. Show that language adopted. Okay, we're going to move to the second piece of information. That's on the supermajority vote. It passed 13-0, and we're looking at that proposed ballot summary language. Mr. Googleman?
Again, on page 2, section 2 of the resolution includes the amendatory language that received over 10 votes by the CRC. And then at the bottom of page 2 and top of page 3 is the ballot question. And so what we're looking for is a motion and a second and to go ahead and approve this.
Any questions, Mr. Googleman?
Normally I'm a woman of few words. This feels very particular. I'm sorry. But is there a way to do it? I don't know legally what verbiage has to be used, so please feel free to correct me. But just trying to simplify it a little. Number 1, can we make it, instead of this is what's currently, this is what we want to do, can we do this is what we want to do, this is what's currently, so shall the charter be amended first and then followed by what's currently there? Leading with the question, I think, is just a little bit of an easier read. Is that
So what
is
you're
that a
asking,
legal thing?
you want to say that currently, in order to change the charter You need,
Well,
it only
yeah, right
requires a
now that's
50
what it-
plus one. We'd like to move to a supermajority.
So that's what it says now. It says the Brevard County Charter may currently be amended by a majority, and then it says shall the charter be amended to require 60%. If we switch those, it would lead with shall the charter be amended to require that at least 60% of elect, blah, 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 blah. Currently, this is what it says.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Tredis.
I think it's better the way it is, because here's why. The voters are asked a question. In the order it's in now, they're asked a question, they answer. You're talking about putting a question first and then a sentence, a description.
Well, yeah, I'd kind of actually make it, so,
I mean,
yeah.
you want a question to be answered, and question and answer. You're putting the question before a statement, so I think it's better the way it is.
Yeah, I prefer it the other way, but that's just a personal preference. I also, some of the, again, this is not a super complicated verbiage. You did a pretty good job of making it very simple. But some things like when a regular voter reads the word elector, I think they don't necessarily know that's talking about them. So if it could be simplified to, a majority of voters, or a majority vote on the issue, things like that, just simplify it a little for the voter.
Mr. Googleman?
Your choice. I think the changes, the change that she's talking about, referring to voters rather than electors, I think is fine. It's going to be a little, we'll have to change that wording though, because I don't think you
Yeah.
want to say voters voting.
Vote, yeah.
Mr. Tredis, you had a point, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think no, I don't. I was thinking that electors, voters could be read to mean registered voters. It's important to make clear that it's 60%
Of those
the
voting on
voters
it.
who vote.
Yeah.
So I think this language does that. I don't know what language alternative language you'd think would be better.
Yeah, well, the alternative language I'd come up with swaps the sentences. So what I had written just says, shall the charter be amended to require a vote of at least 60% of those voting on a proposed amendment to adopt the proposal. The Brevard County Charter currently requires amendments be approved by a simple majority. Or you could replace that with 50%, whatever you prefer. But again, I don't really care what order the sentences are in. We can put it back, but that's kind of how I tweaked it.
Well, I'm going to defer to you, Ms. Roderson, because it's yours. So whatever way you want to go, I'd like to see the commission go. So how do we, besides change, I like the idea of changing from electors. I think that's very smart because you start thinking electoral college and people are like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
So, and then however you want to word it, I'm comfortable with as long as it's legal. So,
Yeah.
and Mr. Googleman, if she kind of turns around the sentences, as I think Mr. Tredis had some concerns about, is that still within the parameters that we're allowed to do it?
You can do it if you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Tredis, now that I've read it out loud, does it make sense what I'm trying to do, or you still don't like the swapping of the sentences?
You read it really fast.
Sorry, I do a lot of that really fast. Would you like me to read it again? Okay. Shall the charter be amended to require a vote of at least 60% of those voting on a proposed amendment to adopt the proposal? The Brevard County Charter currently requires amendments be approved by a simple majority, or I would accept if you want to change that to 50%.
That sounded good to me.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay. So can we vote on that now? We need to change it.
Let me hear that last sentence again.
Okay.
The Brevard County Charter currently requires amendments be approved by a simple majority.
Currently requires
Amendments be approved
amendments be approved
by a simple majority.
by a simple majority. Period.
Yep.
And I Ms. Tredis always bring us a good point. I like to vote on things that we have on paper. Do you want to wait, or are you okay with the changes, Ms. Tredis?
I'm okay with it.
Okay. So all those in favor of the proposed ballot language say yay.
Yay.
All those opposed say nay. Show it adopted. Okay, we're on there.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Could we repeat the first sentence one more time?
Yes.
We know what you voted on, but we want to make sure we get it.
Yeah, please go
exactly
ahead.
right. Yes, thank you.
Shall the charter be amended to require a vote of at least 60% of those voting on a proposed amendment to adopt the proposal.
Thank you.
And all those in favor say yay. All those opposed say nay. Show that adopted. Okay, next we're going to move to Charter Review Proposal number 19. And if you would read those, or everyone wants to look at that language. Anybody have concerns about that language?
I do.
Ms. Tredis, you're recognized.
Thank you. I sent out an email at about, I think, 1:30 p.m. today, and then also it was provided in writing at today's meeting, so hopefully that is in front of you. But my concern with the ballot language on page 2 is it implies to me that the proposal is a vote to make all county officers subject to recall. It doesn't, like the previous proposal, it doesn't state the current status. And I think it's real important to explain the purpose of it is that the charter already provides for the recall election of all these listed officers. So the proposal is to add to that list school board members. The proposal on page 2, as it exists, it says the proposal permits the voters to recall and replace school board members, the clerk of court, property appraiser, supervisor of elections, tax collector, or sheriff in the manner provided by state law for recall of county commissioners. If you just read that, I think the clear indication to me or implication to me is oh, this is a proposal to, from scratch, adopt a new charter amendment which makes all these offices subject to recall. That's not the situation. I think my language is better. It says, quote, the current county charter allows for the recall, election, and replacement of the clerk of court, property appraiser, supervisor of elections, tax collector, and sheriff in the manner provided by state law for recall of county commissioners. Shall the charter be amended to add school board members to this list of county officers who may face recall, election, and replacement in the manner provided by state law for recall of county commissioners? It has the status quo and what the change is. So that's what I'd like.
Sure. Questions on that? Anybody have any concerns with what the sponsor would like to see?
Just one minor
Please, go ahead,
concern, and that is what we're doing here. One of the things we're doing in this amendment is that the charter originally was intended to allow the recall of the county officers or constitutional officers. There was an amendment that was made some years ago, and it refers to allowing the recall of those individuals listed in a particular section. Well, those officers are not listed in that section. So my concern is that somebody could argue that really you don't have the right to recall those people.
I guess what I'd say is it's obviously a typographical error.
Yeah, it's up to you all what you want to
I mean,
do, though.
it is.
I think what you want to do is reflect, I think we're talking about section 4.2.
We are.
Making it in section 4.1, correct? Or is it the other way around?
Whatever.
That's what it is. It's 4.2 going to 4.1 or the other way around.
Yeah.
And clarifying those two particular sections of the charter.
I mean, if there could be, I guess a sentence could be added that proposal corrects a typographical error.
Okay.
Would that be better, do you think, Mr. Goulden?
Yeah, I think.
People are probably more likely to vote for it, says. They're just thinking they're fixing technical error. You might want to add that to number. Yeah. That could be the lead sentence. But do you want to?
Is there a word limit to the ballot?
Yeah, 75.
We're at 72.
Yeah.
Why don't we, so everyone's okay with Mr. Tredis's, I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins? Okay. Is everyone okay with the changes proposed by Mr. Tredis and adding that second additional sentence about
Well,
typographical error?
I think that's fine to do, except Mr. Tredis's language currently consists of 72 words, and there is a 75-word limit.
Lawyers always got a lot of words.
Here's the thing is, you know, does the 75-word limit, does that include the question? Or is it the summary? Because this includes the question, so that's the question. Does the 75-word limit just apply to the ballot summary, or does it also include the question?
Well, the ballot summary and the question are one and the same. The ballot title is separate.
Okay. Well, then I go back to, I think this is fine. And it is a typographical error. and there's no question that it is. I mean,
So we want to use Mr. Tredice's language?
I think I
And
like
Mr.
it.
Jenkins, you had a point you want to make? I'm open to.
Separate issue.
Separate.
On this point, but I mean, not on this point, but on this topic. Does that make
You
sense?
can bring it up now. You can bring it up now. I'd rather. I
I'm
want to
just
make sure.
curious why the state attorney and public defender are not included, and the clerk of the court is.
Well, that goes back to the fact that the charter was never been amended that way, and it wouldn't be possible because we're constitutional officers of the state of Florida, we're state employees, and it wouldn't be possible to amend the county charter to include state attorney and public defender.
Not only that, but.
cover more than just Brevard.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, you'd have a real problem because it's Brevard and Seminole.
Oh, that's true. Two counties.
Yeah, that's the big reason why.
Is that
So-
okay? Okay.
If we want to add the section about the typographical error, we could cut, just suggestions, the word current out of the first sentence. And when it says school board members to this list of county officers, we could cut of county officers because the list is right before it. I don't think it's necessary. And add in, shall the charter be amended to fix a typographical error and add school board members to this list? Then we have, I think, the word count.
Fine with me.
Want to do that again?
So strike current from the first sentence, and then the last sentence would read, shall the charter be amended to fix a typographical error?
Shall the charter be amended to fix, how about correct?
Yeah.
Sounds good. A typographical error, and add school board members to this list, and then strike of county officers and keep the rest.
Does that keep us under 75? I guess it does.
It adds 4 and takes 4, so
There you go.
I think
Yeah.
it does.
Yeah.
All right, did you guys get that written in? Are you okay with that, Melissa? Yeah, okay. All right, so any objection to those changes? Okay, so we have it before us with the changes. All those in favor of that ballot language, please say yay.
Yay.
All those opposed say nay. All right, I think by the majority vote, it is accepted. All right, we're on number 4. That is on the CRC proposal number 4, charter review proposal number 20, the 3-panel attorney process.
And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jacobs had to leave to go to another meeting.
Mhm.
He did tell me that the language that he sent out to everybody earlier today, he now recognizes that it goes way over 75 words.
Yeah, it looks a lot longer just from visual, yeah.
Yeah, and he said, so do whatever you're going to do.
Well, why don't we table that? We've got time to make those changes. I don't think we're going to figure that out, and especially with the sponsor not here, but that should not be hard to change.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Travis, go ahead. Yeah, if we can solve it, that'd be great.
An observation that I think that this wording is the same as the wording from proposal we just grant. I think they're identical. This is the identical wording to the other proposal that we just approved. On number 1.
I don't think you want to have the same wording in the ballot summary. That'll be confusing to people.
I think we should let Mr. Gabriel.
Place of president. Yeah, it's not the same. It's close. It's real close, though. So,
Yeah.
all right.
I agree, it is. So let's table that till next time. Let him take another bite at it, because just looking at it visually, it looks like a heck of a lot more than 75 words.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we adjourn, a couple things just to review. We are going to have votes next time on the vacancy issue, on term limits, and on affordable housing, and also the ballot language associated with that, for a meeting on, you said it's August 4th, right? August the 4th. So be prepared for that in our final meeting, and hopefully we can conclude that business at hand. I appreciate everyone staying a little bit late, and with that, I'm sorry, Ms. Schmidt.
I would appreciate it If anyone, because we have 3 that we're still going to talk about the next meeting, if whatever they have to propose, that they get that out at least a week before so that we can have it and look at it.
Yeah, so that would be on the affordable housing issue.
yes.
We'll ask the term limits, Tom Beludis, to make sure that is in, and then, who's the last one?
And you may
Mr.
have
Burns,
to
yeah.
contact them to say, we need it no later
Yeah.
than.
And
but-
Mr. Gugelman and I had a little conversation, and he is going to be proposing that language if they fail to, with my direction, based on what I've heard. That's okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everyone's time and effort, and Mr. Newman moves you rise, and we are adjourned.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.